Hello and welcome to Cinema to the Letter. This episode, it's that masterpiece known as Nausicaä of the Valley of the Wind. On Cinema to the Letter, we break down the very nature of cinema, letter by letter. For each episode of a season topic, we cover 6 films that fit a C for classic, I for indie, N for new, E for egregious, M for masterpiece, and A for atypical. Who doesn't love an acronym, am I right? I am Thomas, recording live from what looks like a giant, beautiful golden wheat field. I'm next to these ohms. They seem like some cool people. I don't know. People are really judgy about these ohms, I swear. The ohm community is wonderful.
Hello. Yes, I am Brian, and I love airships, and I cannot wait to talk about fucking airships.
Hell yeah. Very key to our discussion of our film for today. But before we even get started with that, Brian, we should talk about the fact that we're on our penultimate episode of our animation season, our M for Masterpiece, and we contemplated, what we wanted to do for this one, and for this season in general. I know we wanted to definitely do a Miyazaki movie. We really wanted to talk about Studio Ghibli, Hayao Miyazaki, his works, and we narrowed down this. But before we even get to Miyazaki even, what is your history with anime? Japanese animation? What is your general history with that particular type of animation?
Yes, well, before I get into that, obviously this is anime adjacent, but I think Hayao Miyazaki would shoot you with a gun if you called his movies anime.
Look, I think Miyazaki, to be fair, at the existence of this podcast would also shoot us, I think.
That's true.
There would be no pleasing Miyazaki, I don't think. Well, I think I've gotten past any of that illusion that Miyazaki would at all like what we're doing here.
No, yeah, but with anime in particular, I grew up with it a lot, mainly television shows like Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, a bit of Naruto. It was mainly my cousins who were really, really into that, and because I was around and, what else was I going to do? I was forced to watch it, basically, and I was always really off-put by specifically, Dragon Ball and just that kind of the very weird style of that, the very strange kind of aesthetic, which I have come to love, especially as I started watching a little bit of it after Akira Toriyama died last year, I believe. Mm-hmm. It's something I've come to watch a little bit more. I still have a very surface level appreciation for it. I just recently watched Cowboy Bebop for the very first time. But it is interesting. Yeah, we're talking about Miyazaki, and he has one of many great interviews that he does is about anime in particular, and the style of anime that he kind of detests, with the really big reactions and the sort of goofier kind of tone. Even in the anime that I do like, that's something I really butt up against. And as we'll talk about with Miyazaki, his movies don't really do that, but I love, obviously, the style, the aesthetics of it. It's a particularly pleasing art style, obviously. I think for a lot of reasons that are pretty obvious, I think, especially if you get into Miyazaki's movies, as we'll get into. But there's so much anime to watch that's newer, older, that I do find myself getting really into just kind of surface level anime. But what about you? I'm curious, did you grow up with it at all?
Well, I think the big thing is that, for me, I was at the exact right age as a child in the late 90s to get into Pokemon. Pokemon was
this as well, yes.
Right, yeah, but I was at the beginning of it, which is that first 150 Pokemon. Like, I knew all of them by heart, and I watched the show constantly. I saw Pokemon the first movie in theaters. That was really my introduction to anime to any degree. But at the same time, I had a weird kind of relationship with it, because I also had a similar thing of, like, Dragon Ball was, like, the thing for people who were, slightly older than me. They loved Dragon Ball. And, I wanted to try and make friends with them. So there was a certain point where, like, when I was very deep into, like, my Simpsons phase, where I drew, like, a Bart Simpson as a Super Saiyan kind of thing. As just, like, a cool little thing. And I was just showing it to, like, a person who I was like, hey, this is, is this a connection? Can we be friends? And this guy immediately was just like, well, this is bullshit. Like, what's his power levels? Does he go over 9,000? What the hell is this? This is dumb.
Oh, that's unfortunate. What a dweeb.
right, a true dweeb, who really put me off of anime for, like, a while after that point. And I think to this day, I still have a trepidation about, like, anime shows, though I think that's just more my general aversion to television, which is just amplified by stuff like, what is it, what's the one that got a live action remake recently on Netflix? That's, like, the pirate themed one.
One Piece?
One Piece.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Something like One Piece where it's, like, thousands of episodes long.
It never ends.
I can't commit to that, right? And even Dragon Ball had that, too, because I remember when I was a kid, whenever I watched Dragon Ball, it would constantly just be, like, people screaming at each other from long distances. And then they'd fight by the end of the episode, and then it's, like, to be continued. And the next episode would pretty much be the same exact thing. Because I found out that they were trying to, like, extend things because the manga had, like, caught up with it. And they were like, oh, shit, we need to stretch time out.
I mean, the thing about Dragon Ball, though, and still to this day, I feel this more, even though, again, when I was a kid, I would have no idea what was going on, because who does know? But would be the, like, and I use this word a lot, but just the vibe of it, the style would be enough, like, not just the animation style, but the art direction, like, all that stuff would be enough for me to be like, oh, this is weird, and I don't know what's going on, but I'm kind of weirdly into it. The character design, of course, like, all that kind of stuff, like, did really, really intrigue me in particular.
It's weird, especially because, like, as someone who was, like, a big cartoon kid, it was definitely such a shock, a culture shock, truly. Just like, this doesn't look like Scooby-Doo, or whatever I'm used to as a kid. And then I remember after that kind of, trepidation about it from a social situation like that, I didn't really get back into anime to any degree until sort of, like, I discovered who Miyazaki was and his work. And I got an interest in at least, like, watching some of those movies and then dipping my toes into some of the other things, like Satoshi Kon's work, like Perfect Blue and stuff like that. And then the bigger classics like Akira and stuff like that. So I am like you.
Shell, yeah.
Right. I am like you. I'm much more of a surface level sort of person who's perused but hasn't dived deep. It's just something that I can't really, like, jump into nearly as well, especially, like, with the show angle of it. But at least respect, especially on a cinematic level, a lot of, like, modern anime stuff like Suzume, and I forgot what that director's name. Certain auteur people within the anime world I have interest in, but yeah, it's such a massive thing to get into. And I think we've mentioned this before, that, like, we already have a lot of other hobbies and other things that we like watching, just like anime's just like a whole nother thing to dig into.
Which is why, like I said, like Cowboy Bebop or Neon Genesis Evangelion, which one of my faves, will put a pin in that. There is an ending to it. That it is the one thing about, like, One Piece where people are like, people get obsessed with it and it becomes like their whole lives. And again, yeah, I have other things to get to sink my teeth into, but I prefer something like that, or Cowboy Bebop, which is like every episode is basically standalone, and there is kind of an overarching theme, but there's an end point basically. More with Evangelion that has a cleaner end point, and then there's the remake movies. Whatever, we don't need to get into that yet. No. But yes, the kind of, like, this goes on for like 1,000 episodes, and then we do like Dragon Ball Z. There's like a million. I can't think of any, but, like, there's just so many spin-offs and stuff like that. So yeah, and there has been, I mean, to go off your point, I haven't seen Suzume, but is that the same guy who did oh man, Your Name? Or is that's a different guy?
I'm not. I think that's a different guy. Once again, apologies, folks. We're not experts, as you can tell. We're not very well prepared.
But there has been a kind of resurgence of a lot of people, like the guy who did Your Name, Makoto Shinkai, who have become, yes, he is the same one who did Suzume, that are making a bit more like anime that is not, and again, like I know I don't mean to blanket all of anime this way, but that isn't the typical like big reaction, goofy, like wide-eyed kind of like things that I like is one of the reasons I just don't get into it. So yeah, there are a lot of like newer stuff, but more on the movie side I like to keep up with than, like you said, the show side, which is just so difficult.
Yeah, another guy like that is the Mamoru Hosada, who also did stuff like Wolf Children, Summer Wars, who is like does incredible work as well. But with Miyazaki though, I'm curious about your origin story for his work. Where did you start getting into him?
Yeah, I think as I was getting into movies, I remember like Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle. Those are kind of the most well regarded, I would say, Miyazaki movies, especially obviously they're both of the 21st century, and they were like the cool animated movie. And you know, Studio Ghibli, the logo, the Totoro obviously was like really recognizable. And this was, I watched all of his movies when I was in high school, and I watched them, all of them except Lupin the Third. I didn't catch up with that one until much later. And this was the first one I watched. I watched them all in order.
Oh, okay. So
had
Nausicaä was the first one you had seen.
Yes, because I had a weird thing where if I was going to do a director and watch all their movies, I had to do it in order. And so this was the first one that I watched. Miyazaki is a really special director for me, and I watched all of his movies all the time. I revisit them. I think they are not just the pinnacle of like animation, but of all of cinema for me. Like every single one of his movies, I just completely fell in love with the style. Obviously, just the look of them, just the artwork itself is, you know, it's amazing. It's why you can find like, I don't know, like ambient like 4-hour videos of like the rain from My Neighbor Totoro, you know, and stuff like that. And we'll get into it because I think this movie basically contains most of his interests that he will explore in his career, but the pacing of them I really loved. They were slower, they were more kind of gentler. They didn't have the kind of, you know, one of the things he's talked about is not doing the kind of American style of animation that was more exaggerated, but having characters that moved like people and moved slower, and the gestures, how they moved was really important to them. And so I love just all of that stuff. But also, as we'll talk about with this movie, the fantasy science fiction angle just really, really enticed me. The otherworldly nature, just all these worlds that he creates, and obviously, as I mentioned, the airships, the like the obsession with aviation, the obsession with little tiny little guys, little creatures, and all that stuff. It just it was so exciting to me, and like truly, when I get to points in my life where I'm like depressed and I don't know what to do, I do just find myself rewatching all of these movies and finding like a true like answer to life, almost like there is that element, I think, in all of Miyazaki's movies, even in this movie. But yeah, I mean, I love him. I still love him. We talked about The Boy and the Heron when that came out, and like, yeah, I'm absolutely obsessed with his movies, and we'll talk about that. But yeah, what's your history?
I remember becoming aware of the sort of like Studio Ghibli, Hayao Miyazaki stuff through the Oscars, and sort of the thing that the second ever Best Animated Feature Oscar was won by Spirited Away, of course, following up Shrek. Equal films, totemic,
very similar movies,
fashion. Right? Very similar. And I remember like that being very surprising, and I was just like, I had never heard of this movie before, or whatever. This particular style looked very different. I remember that poster very vividly, like in my local theater, just really like captivating me in a weird way of just like this little girl and the pigs and all this other stuff that just like was very fascinating. And then of course, this was around the time that Disney was kind of putting out the dubbed versions of these movies, thanks to a certain person who used to run Pixar, who was a very big fan of Miyazaki, and wanted to make sure his work was kind of like translated out and like distributed in English language, because he had a rocky history of that prior to this point. If you see, for example, the original version of the original English dubbed version of Nausicaä in the Valley of the Wind, I believe it's called Warriors of the Wind, which you've never seen in full, but apparently it's a hatchet job where they cut 20 minutes out, and based on the clips I've seen, the audio quality is garbage for the voices, quite frankly. So yeah, this was a concerted effort to make at least like faithful dubbed versions. And I remember watching Spirited Away not too long after it won that Oscar, probably. I remember very distinctly, I watched it, Howl's Moving Castle, and I think Ponyo the same way, which is the way I consumed a lot of cinema, especially in high school, which was I rented it off iTunes, put it on my 160 gigabyte iPod, and then hooked that up with the red, white, and yellow things up to my television, so I'm sure pristine quality. The exact way Miyazaki would want it to be seen.
Well, since you're mentioning antiquated ways of watching these movies, the way I watched all of these was through Netflix's DVD service.
Yes. Okay.
And I would get like, I had the thing where you could get 2 of them a week, or 2 of them at a time.
Right.
And that's how and I would just wait for the next one to come in the mail, and I was like so excited to get to the next one. But man, what a time.
What a time. Yes, especially for a while, you could only really watch his stuff on like physical media to any degree, because he didn't have the streaming rights available in the US until the HBO Max deal went through. Which, for all the issues that Max and HBO Max has had over the years, at the very least they have that Studio Ghibli catalog that's been very consistent, even through all the turmoil, to allow people to see them. Yeah, and I remember like very vividly watching Spirited Away for the first time, and just feeling, once again, that weird wave of just like, this is unlike any movie I've ever seen before.
Never seen anything like this.
No, just completely like opened a whole new breadth of like what the world could be, and I really just fell in love with that, and especially, I can't emphasize enough how, even as much as like the animation is so great in these movies, Joe Hisashi's scores for these movies like make me cry instantaneously. Like if I hear the Spirited Away theme, I will cry immediately. It's just an automatic response.
Any of them. I mean, I really like, one of my favorite ones is from the beginning of Castle in the Sky. Mm-hmm. And just that way that it kind of starts with this like sort of little kind of jaunt, and then like goes into this big bombastic orchestra. Yeah, he is really up there in terms of like, obviously he hasn't made as much stuff as this guy, but as someone like John Williams for me, where any piece of music he made, is just absolutely legendary.
I do also love the fact that he only does the scores either for Miyazaki movies or Beat Takeshi's movies. Like, that's all he does scores for. It's so weird. But yeah, I mean, so that's definitely, I saw Howl's Moving Castle that way as well, and Ponyo in a similar fashion. And then I didn't catch up with, like, all of his movies until Blank Check did their series about Miyazaki. So that's when I, like, filled in all the gaps necessarily. And we've talked about this before, but, like, he's one of those fascinating figures where, like, he has brought so much to animation, and he has such a great track record with his movies, but it's so fascinating seeing him do interviews where the man, respectfully, is perhaps one of the most cynical, bitter people I've ever seen interviewed, yet he makes this, like, beautiful, whimsical art that makes you cry. It's such a fascinating contrast.
I mean, and, like, I don't even think his movies are. Yes, they again, like I said, like I genuinely believe that they contain the meaning of life in them if you watch them and just absorb them, and again, we'll talk. We'll talk about it as we get more deeper into it, because I want to unpack that a bit more. But like, you watch something like Princess Mononoke, which is like, I think literally has the dialogue with the sick people in the bed that have, I can't remember the name of the disease that they have, but like, who are like life is awful, life is miserable, the world is a terrible place, and there is this kind of like battle in his movies of thinking the world is so horrible, as he very often does, but also finding like a real beauty in it at times. And I love any interview with him. What's the documentary called? Kingdom of
Dreams and Shadows, I think is what it's called.
Yeah, very good documentary. And like,
Yes.
if you own, as I do, on all of these movies on physical media, there's lots of great behind the scenes footage of him animating and stuff like that. That is just is amazing. He's such an amazing and fascinating person for so many reasons.
And as we sit here recording, I'm wearing my Super Yaki Anime Was a Mistake shirt.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Which,
that's that interview. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah, I agree with you that there is definitely like some of that sort of natural cynicism to him does come out in the movies, but it tends to be with, like you mentioned, like some of the adult characters or even the villains, when his movies do have villains. Which is another thing I just love, that like so often his movies do not even have villains. It's just like people living their lives, and the obstacles are just like living life, basically.
And he is one of the most, it's funny, even though he works in animation, he is one of the most human filmmakers of all time. Mm-hmm. Every single one of his characters, even his villains, maybe less so in this movie because it's his first original movie, but every one of his characters is so human, so three-dimensional. He never, even his villains are not these evil mustache-twirling villains. They have a real sense of humanity, a real sense of motivation and stuff like that. That is, like, again, it's not what we see in a lot of especially American animation, where, again, like, how many Disney villains are just kind of like, I mean, Cruella de Vil, like, come on, but it is what's so fascinating about him as well, is that he is so fascinated by people and loves people so much.
Right, and I think he really understands, like you mentioned, that humanity is really because he's able to mix a lot of that, like, inherent cynicism with, like, a genuine optimism from, like, the main protagonist. Like, I watched Totoro in theaters recently for the Ghibli Fest. Mm-hmm. I brought a friend of mine who had only seen Kiki's Delivery Service when she was a kid and was curious about it. And she, like, adored it. And she was like, I need to see more of these movies. But I'm sorry, Brian, I'm going to tell a story about this screening that might hurt you deeply. But we were sitting next to a family with, like, kids who were, like, 3 kids who were maybe, I don't know, at oldest, like, 7. And the movie started, and it wasn't really clear based on the screening we went to that if it would be dubbed or subtitled. It was subtitled with Japanese. The mom got up and then went over, was gone for a little bit, and then she went over to the kids and whispered to them, because they were clearly, like, not able to quite follow, like, the subtitles and everything because they were so young. So she, like, whispered over to them, we're gonna go see Smurfs. And then they got up and they went to go see the Smurfs movie.
And much like Miyazaki, I feel like Hayao Miyazaki. I have my white apron on, smoking a cigarette. Just, what are we doing here? Humanity is all evil.
Smurfs was a mistake.
Yeah. I will say this about something like My Neighbor Totoro. Like, you could watch that movie without any dialogue and understand the story and understand and get the message, get the vibe of it. It is, it's one of the beautiful things about that movie is that, this is not an original thing to say, but, like, there's no plot, there's no villain, there's no there's some tension at the end, but it is just so sensorial and just so slice of life in a way that, like, really any of his movies are, like, part of the reason why I put these movies on all the time is just to sit in these worlds, it just soak up all the tiny details that that his movies contain. And I'm sure that family got the same thing from the new Smurfs movie, which looks fantastic.
Clearly. Right, yes. Doesn't it all look like every single line of dialogue is ADR'd based on the trailer in any way. It looks more dubbed than like a Miyazaki movie dubbed by Disney. But no, yeah, I agree with you that like what works about him is like he's said this many times in interviews as well. Like his real attention to like character through movement makes his works feel, like you mentioned, like they transcend language on a lot of levels, because it's not necessarily about like the heavy plot. I would argue Nausicaa is one of the few that is more plot heavy in terms of just like the dynamics of what's going on and everything. But yeah, I would say like Totoro, Ponyo has a similar thing. Even to a certain extent, Spirited Away also has this of just like you can follow the story just visually by all this stuff, and it's really because of just like the subtleties that he's able to capture. Like when I watched My Neighbor Totoro, especially on a big screen, it just reminded me so much of having like I have two younger sisters, and I see so much of like them as kids inside those kids, the way that they interact with each other. I think few people have been able to capture just the sensibility of being a child and what that like means on like a day-to-day basis, not even just the like the usual things that like a kid's movie would deal with. It's about like the sincere like quiet things, like the bits in Totoro where like the little sister like goes over to the older sister's class, and it's just like I don't even need like a specific thing from you. I just need you to like hug me because I feel so desperate and alone without you, kind of thing. It's communicated all visually, all with just like the way these characters interact with each other. It's something that like, you know, sadly like Western animation can rarely achieve.
And there's like this movie has so many quiet little moments, but like I think of something like Kiki's Delivery Service, which I was talking to you about this weekend. Like I cannot tell you which is my favorite Miyazaki movie. Like you can ask me today, you can ask me at the end of this record. It could be a different answer, but Kiki's Delivery Service is just, I love that movie so much, and it has that moment when Kiki loses her ability to function basically, and she can't understand Gigi, and just the moment where she sinks into the bed.
Yes.
And he just like sits there, Miyazaki sits there for a minute and lets you just like wallow alongside her. Again, it is a fun, whimsical movie. It is also a really like sensitive and beautiful portrayal of like what it feels like to just be depressed. And then, you know, his next movie is Porco Rosso, a just fun, you know, swashbuckling kind of adventure movie. And he's able to just do both of those things. And I think he's one of those filmmakers, I think I was also telling you this, like every single one of his films to me is basically a stone cold masterpiece in my opinion. Like even the ones that I like slightly less than others, I still think are like phenomenal movies. And there's very few directors who can do that in general, but there's very few filmmakers in animation and who can do it for so long. You know, like that is just an insane kind of feat, I think.
Yeah, it's truly remarkable, especially like I mentioned. Like I even have my bottom currently for Miyazaki, and I told you I need to revisit this movie. Didn't get a chance to before we started recording, but my bottom is like Castle in the Sky, and that movie's great.
You.
That movie's great. That's the thing. It's like there's even when that's like your quote unquote bottom, it's just like wonderful, dude. Like you made all these other like giant masterpieces, and it feels like you're mentioning, like there's this a bit of like a mixture where you can have the interpretation of like, oh, they're just whimsical or they're just like a rousing adventure, like Porco Rosso. Porco Rosso in theory is much more of like just a rousing adventure story, but there's even in that movie a lot of like interesting takes on like, oh, what it means to be like a post-war vet who's kind of lost in a world that doesn't really like appeal to you anymore with like Porco Rosso. Just like there's a interesting kind of sadness inherent to that character at the same time that he's a fun pig man who doesn't want to be a fascist. Good on him.
Yeah, better a pig than a fascist.
Hell yeah, exactly. We are a pro-pig, anti-fascist podcast in general. It is interesting I was able to like weave a lot of that stuff in, but it doesn't feel as overt, even with like modern movies where like you can tell stuff like from Western animation that's influenced by Miyazaki, but at the same time there still is like just the certain edge that's missing from even other Studio Ghibli movies. Like Studio Ghibli's made other great movies that aren't Miyazaki specific. I'll be talking about one later in the show. But at the same time, even some of their other output doesn't quite measure up. How do you feel about the other like non-Miyazaki Ghibli movies in general?
I haven't gone super deep on those.
Mm-hmm.
I have seen some of them. Like I've seen like Grave of the Fireflies, one that, like you said, you will talk about. I have not gone into his Fail Sons movies, unfortunately. Not because
Goro
of
Miyazaki.
yeah, not because of him, just because I've just never done. I've just never gotten into them. But yeah, they have a lot of variety. One of the ones I watched fairly recently, called Ocean Waves,
Mm-hmm.
which is like 72 minutes, by the way, is just a like slice of life movie about like college kids. And it is fascinating that they just have this very interesting kind of history. They're an interesting studio. And yeah, like of the kind of main guys, like Isao Takahata, who did Grave of the Fireflies, like who has a certain reputation, but
Mm-hmm.
I've never really gotten into a lot of his movies, not for any other reason, but yeah. Have you seen much of the other non Miyazaki Ghibli ones?
Well, I have seen the one Goro I've seen is from up on Poppy Hill, which I thought was cute,
Mm.
but I think
Hmm.
definitely feels like lesser amongst the other Ghiblis. As you mentioned, there's kind of a weird, interesting reputation of Goro kind of trying to constantly appeal to his father. Well, really rough spot where it's like, hey, you're the son of the guy who like basically created a whole nother arm of Japanese animation that is like so beloved. Now you do one. You do it. Go ahead. And that's pretty tough to kind of like measure up to. But I like that one. I've seen Arietti, which is cute but kind of forgettable. I recently watched the one The Cat Returns, which is kind of related to the movie I'm
Mm.
going to talk about later. Very odd movie. Basically about a young girl who's like, oh, I'm just trying to live my life, and then I run into a cat, and this cat can talk, and then this cat also is from a land of cats where they want to take me and make me become like the bride of the prince of cats.
Sounds kind of fun.
It is interesting. I would say it's like lesser of like the Ghibli works, but
Sure.
it's a curiosity, especially that it's like a spin-off of a movie where the spin-off character is like someone who appeared in one scene, this cat character, and he ends up also being like her savior, and she admits at a certain point like, I have a crush on you, and it's like, young lady, this is a cat. I don't think this is gonna work out. I don't know what this is for, but there still is at the same time like an interesting whimsy. I think the only true cynical exercise I've seen from Studio Ghibli is that one the Baby Yoda short that was on Disney Plus.
Oh,
That
I haven't watched that.
it's 3 minutes long, and it's literally just it's cute, but at the same time it is just clearly like someone needed some money to finish up the Boy and the Heron. All power to him. Glad that movie got completed in its final form. Great movie, especially another thing with Miyazaki, the whole like I'm retiring, like he did that ever since like,
Yeah,
Mononoke, right?
three times. Yeah, Mononoke was the first one.
Right, and then he comes back. I mean, if Boy and the Heron's your last movie, also to go out on, in theory, a beautiful final work that really I feel
Yeah,
like
he
sums up a
really
lot of his stuff.
he has that multiple times where it's like, hey, if Princess Mononoke is your last movie, great way
Right.
to go out. Hey, if Ponyo is your last movie, hey, if The Wind Rises is your, like he just constantly i- goes out with bangers. And I guess this would maybe transition us into the movie, but like last thing I want to say as well, I have seen, like I said, a few documentaries and behind the scenes stuff of them making these movies. I mentioned earlier, I roughly understand how animation works and how it's made, but it still feels like magic to me. Miyazaki's way of animating specifically is like the dark arts or something. Like it is so insane to me that this is how these movies are made. I just cannot imagine how fucking difficult it must be. And it's the thing about animation, because you have to draw everything, you cannot waste any single frame ever. And you feel that, I think, so much in Miyazaki's movies. Like, it is insane. Every single like frame feels so painstakingly crafted, and it is insane to me. No matter how many times I watch these movies, I will never not be blown away by how unbelievable they look.
Well, yeah, and especially even in like a modern context, because like with Miyazaki, you can really track sort of like the kind of hand drawn animation, particularly in Japan, and how it's like evolved, and particularly like as things go on. I believe at this point he like Boy and the Heron had some digital work, I think like coloring and stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's been going on ever since, I don't know, probably Spirited Away or something like that. But it's notable where you see like other people, like The Cat Returns is much more like digital kind of like hand drawn animation. And it really shows. It feels a bit cheaper, even though it still has a bit of that Ghibli magic. Versus all of the Miyazaki directed movies never feel like they have any kind of like loss in step in terms of that kind of like magic. But yeah, why don't we go ahead and transition finally into Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind.
All right, princess, ready to launch!
Tato, hold on!
All I do is worry when she's running around out there.
I'm Nausicaä. I'm from the Valley of the Wind.
Princess!
Soon this place, too, will be consumed by the toxic jungle.
But I don't understand. Who could have polluted the entire Earth? Listen, you don't understand the jungle.
Nausicaa, be calm.
All this killing must stop! You must stop! I'm afraid of myself, Lord Yupa.
The jungle is killing you, yet you want to live in harmony with it?
Go, Nausicaa, go! She certainly knows how to read the wind.
So, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind came out March 11th, 1984, from, as we mentioned, director-writer Hayao Miyazaki, based on the manga, which he had written. He had written, I believe, it's only the first 2 volumes at the time he made this film adaptation, though I found out apparently, like, after he had made this film, he continued to make it with the Animage magazine that had published it, all the way until March of 1994. He was still making continuing the story. So I'm very curious to see like how that like continues forward after that point. But I haven't read any of the manga. I know you said you picked up a couple of the volumes. Did you get into any of those?
I did get a couple of them, the first 3 volumes from the library, and I did not because I didn't have time. But I flipped through it and I read like the first few pages, and it is basically the first scene of this movie, not including the cold open. But yeah, an interesting kind of piece of adaptation. Like, you know, obviously his filmmaking career starts with Lupin III, The Castle of Cagliostro, and this being his first quote unquote original movie, but being based off of something that he had written and drawn himself is very interesting, I think. And we'll talk about, I think, some of the story of it, but it is fascinating to see how he's able to kind of adapt something that, I don't know, watching this movie, you can feel that there is something larger. There's a larger world that he's created, but he has to kind of hone in because it's a feature-length film, you know?
Yeah. What I like about Nausicaa so much, and what really appealed to me when I watched it for the first time, is like you're mentioning, it feels just like we are stumbling into like a world that has existed for a while. Because like in the case of this movie, in case you're unaware somehow of it, basically Nausicaa follows a titular character who is this young girl that's living in a post-apocalyptic world where it's implied that these sort of god warrior creatures, or giant sort of kaiju-sized monsters, unleashed 7 days of like horror to like eliminate most life on Earth. But she is amongst the few survivors. There's a few different camps of survivors that are in separate, different, disparate parts of the world. And she is part of the Valley of the Wind, as it were, where it's the only place on Earth that still has like a consistent wind constantly flowing, which she and her fellow villagers use to really hone in on airships and gliders and such. That's their main form of sort of transportation around. And she is visited by Lord Yupa, who has been going on a journey to like kind of look around the different places to see about like any other signs of life and whatnot. And he's returned to the village, and while he's there, the village gets invaded by this different group of villagers from a separate country who come in and initially say like, "Oh no, we just want peace. We just want to rule over you so that we can make sure that you don't have any of these issues with the toxic forest or the Sea of Despair. What is it called?
Sea of Decay.
Sea of Decay.
Yeah,
yes.
the Tolmekians.
Right. Yes. Who invade? Yes, and claim that they'll be able to save everybody, but Nausicaa's kind of skeptical about it, especially as it turns out the Tolmekians are mainly in it to destroy the forest. That does have these kind of like toxic elements that have invaded and have like infected some people in the valley, but also are able to provide this clean irrigation system, which she's able to harness like through her windmills and stuff. And they also want to destroy these giant bug creatures called the Ohms that have been a constant sort of threat for the remaining bits of humanity. But Nausicaa has found much more fascination with them, and as the movie goes along, she grows more of a genuine connection with these giant bug creatures. And yeah, it's basically, shockingly for a Miyazaki movie, a movie about how man and nature often conflict, despite the fact they should become one.
Yeah. Which again is something that he continues to revisit. You know,
Yes.
I think like this movie's most similar to something like Princess Mononoke in how they are big, epic fantasy adventure films. They have very different aesthetics and very different worlds, but like they are both those genre with a very specific, as you mentioned, environmentalist theme going throughout. And obviously, yeah, he comes to revisit this in Ponyo. There's a bit of that in Spirited Away, would say. It just, yeah, becomes this fascination where human beings are evil and are destroying each other and the world. And how, again, this is a thing I just love about all of his movies, how they are movies that almost beg you not just to like slow down in terms of like his specific kind of pacing, but really appreciate life and the natural world, and how in a very like, not in a hippie kind of sense, but like how you can become more attuned to nature and to the world around you and not become consumed by like industrialization and all of the horrors of the modern world. And yeah, he just wraps this up in incredibly built world that is also just a really fun adventure movie.
Yeah, I think like from the sort of, well, not the cold open like you're mentioning, where we see Yupa kind of exploring the decayed kind of ruins of one village, which is awesome. But the first time we're really introduced to Nausicaa, when she's traveling through like this very abandoned kind of area that has all these spores there that are like very destructive to human lungs, and she's wearing her mask, and she like takes like the eyepiece off of like one of the ohms, one of the shells.
Shell. Yeah.
Yes, and just that moment where she's like laying down in the spores with that shell kind of covering her.
Yeah.
It's this wonderful moment, like you're mentioning, where it's like we were just introduced to like, oh my god, wow, this place is desolate. There's nobody around. The world that we knew is gone. But you can see somebody like Nausicaa who, like we mentioned, despite the horrific implications of this world and what's happened here, this is all that Nausicaa knows, and Nausicaa has learned to like really respect and love the environment that she's in, despite the fact that it's deadly to her. I just think that's what's interesting, because like this movie and a lot of Miyazaki's movies that are about nature are much more inherently about like humanity having, like you said, all the destructive force, but also that inherent fear of being subsumed by, like taken over by nature. and still wanting to be a top dog. Like in this case, like humans are the underdog. They are not like the main source anymore. But people keep talking about like, oh no, we want to be able to do this so like the human world can rise up again, so we can become the main people here. And the movie constantly is like arguing the idea that maybe we're not supposed to be top dog. Maybe we were top dog and the Earth responded by destroying us entirely.
Yeah.
And I find that, so fascinating where it's like human beings are these creatures who think they are the absolute top of the food chain. And Miyazaki's like, well, no, we should be like a part of like what this ecosystem is, not the major part of it. And the Earth will respond to that by sending a bunch of bugs after us to fucking squash us.
So many of his movies, even the ones that are kind of whimsical, like something like Totoro, for instance, like are about like recognizing, maybe not Totoro, but like his movies are about recognizing how insignificant people really are in the grand scheme of things. And what I think is similar to Totoro is there is this kind of like entire world out there that you don't really understand. You don't need to understand it. Like in that movie, like there's no origin story for the Totoro, like that the cat bus, like what is that thing? Like it is about just recognizing that there are forces out there that are greater than humanity. And I love that moment that you mentioned where she's like laying in the spores kind of covering her. And then even before that, I love this is the thing about Miyazaki just having this like being obsessed with movement, when she like pours the like shell that she has out with the gunpowder, and you see her just like gently pour it out, and she takes her rifle and she like flips the thing back to light it, and it's just his movies just move in this way that is so, again, like just begging you to slow down. And I love that, and I love this being like, like that Nausicaä is intrigued by all of this, even like the insects, and she has this desire to like love all life, basically. Constantly in the movie, people are like, let's kill that bug, let's kill that thing, and she's like, no, there's a better way to solve this than just like violence. And I love that this movie is this conversation where you have these different factions that are all have different takes on what we should do in the world and how we should assert our dominance, when that's just not, it's not the point, basically.
Yeah, and it's also interesting too with like you're mentioning kind of like the violence and conflict. Like that's something that Miyazaki tends to avoid more often than not in movies after this. Because like he'll have like obviously like Mononoke has like very much like head decapitations and shit like that. Yeah. But he'll go a while without like wanting to have like big explosions. He'll often say that in interviews as well. Just like, I don't want to have giant explosions. I don't want to have like these other things. But it's kind of interesting, especially when you consider like this or Mononoke, or even like the opening of Boy and the Heron with the explosions. The guy can make really cool looking animated explosions.
Oh, 100%.
Right, I mean, but it's so interesting that he likes to avoid that more often. Right? Would you agree with that? Post Nausicaä, there's less of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And even in Porco Rosso, like, that movie is so fun and everything. It doesn't have these like big, massive set pieces. It has like the dogfights, and he's much more interested in like adventure than these like when there are big explosions, like in Castle in the Sky, when the robot kind of goes berserk and starts murdering everyone in the kingdom. And obviously this comes from Miyazaki growing up in post-World War II Japan, but it is presented as horrifying and horrific, and you're just supposed to be intimidated by this and I'll say it a third time, horrified by it. Like, even in this movie, when there is a giant force who, again, is basically a stand-in for nuclear war, any kind of like armed warfare that humanity has created. Yeah, it's something I find really fascinating, and I love that he doesn't fall back on that he falls back on these really beautiful like in this movie, for instance, like these beautiful moments of like gliding and aviation, being in the air, the freedom that kind of brings, which is in all of his movies, basically.
Yeah, and even when there's like a conflict, it's oftentimes like it's either like you're mentioning, like presented as this like horrific thing, or even in like Porco Rosso, one of the best things in that movie is the finale fist fight is like so stupid. It's just like two guys doing this like long drag out punch out fight, and it's like, guys, nothing's being accomplished here. You guys are just being like assholes, and nothing's really going on.
And they get so bruised.
Yeah,
it's like comical.
They have like all the bumps possible on their heads and shit. It's so good. But yeah, like here, the a lot of the horrific implications of like the god warriors or the giant warriors. I want to say this too. With this one, I prepped by watching both the Japanese original version with subtitles, but also I did watch the dub. Now, this is a common kind of thing with Japanese animation, is subs versus dubs. And I know you are more partial to, you haven't watched even much of the dubs, right? You've only seen like a lot of the Japanese originals.
Only one I have seen of the dubs is Ponyo, which is a very, very good dub. I think I turned on the Wind Rises dub for like 5 minutes, and then... Yeah, but sorry, go on. I want you to finish your point before I get into this whole conversation, because I have a lot to say about it.
Well, no, this is what I wanted to open up about. It's just like, what is your... So you have that preference for the subs.
Yeah.
What do you think is like the main reason why you like gravitate toward that and haven't really visited the dubs at all?
I think generally I have a really low tolerance for dubs. For a lot of reasons. I just think like on a very basic level, I have such a low tolerance for American voices trying to say Japanese names but not even attempting to like pronounce them right. It happens so much like in video games where like they'll be like, Sasaki, what do you do, like that kind of like voice acting. I find so like ear piercing. I think also the fact that there is a Japanese voice gives you kind of a barrier where I don't speak Japanese. And so you don't get the kind of thing like when we were watching those Don Bluth movies when we did Secret of Nim, like the voice acting in a lot of those movies, with all due respect to some of those movies, is kind of bad sometimes and is so condescending and so like juvenile in a lot of ways. And I think that's what a lot of like the bad dubs are. That I'm often just kind of like, just give me the original. Like, just give me the original voice acting. It is often it's always really, really great voice acting in these movies, in the Japanese. That I just think, yeah, like, I'm just not interested in like the star-laden kind of thing. Like, I've never really been like, the only one that's gotten me to maybe watch them is because Michael Keaton is Porco Rosso in the American dub, which is very intriguing, but I am always just kind of like, give me the original version of this. It always sounds better because you have to like, again, there's just a difference in what the writing is supposed to be, and trying to you have to change the voice lines. You have to change the writing a little bit to make it different and work different in English. And yeah, it never works for me. Anytime I watch these again, I'm like, maybe I should try the dub, and then I never do, because I'm just like, it's better this way, in my opinion. I have a very hard standpoint on this, but maybe one day I will give the dubs a chance.
Yeah, I think here's the thing, and this is going to get me some hate, I guess, out there in that subs versus dubs discussion, is that, like, I have the weird thing where maybe it's just the way that I was programmed as a child who, like, along with stuff like Pokemon, I also grew up a lot with, like, the various different translations of other Japanese animation stuff, like Speed Racer, the original, like, on Cartoon Network, when they would show that, some of the older, like, anime stuff like that, where just like that, the dub thing kind of like is just something I was weirdly like programmed to watch so much. Even with like the Studio Ghibli movies, what was mostly available for me to even watch when I would like rent these movies would be the dubbed version in English. And I don't know, I just had that kind of programming in there, I guess, because I've often seen these ones in the dubs at least first. I remember when I was doing the blank check thing, I tried to just go for like the Japanese originals, wherever possible, unless it's a thing of like, there would be some points where it's like, I don't have the time to like read and do other shit at the same time while I'm trying to watch this movie kind of thing. And I would like lean toward the dubs. But yeah, it's definitely been like, I don't know. I'm not as judgy on subs versus dubs necessarily. It's just like, I don't know, whatever works at your pace. Especially, I've seen like on anime films with people who like focus too much on like the subtitles, not as much on like the actual visuals. So it just, I think, really depends on like what your own individual, like viewing habits are necessarily. For like however you can enjoy the movie, I think that's what really matters more. But at the same time, I do tend to want to avoid like bad dubs. Like I recently watched, because it's the only way I could watch it, rewatch it, Castle of Cagliostro via Hoopla, which has the weird 90s dub where they don't call him Lupin and they call him Wolf and shit like that. It's like, I want to avoid shit like that necessarily. But I think most of the Disney dubs that are done of the Miyazaki movies are quite good. Particularly even this one, watching them like both back to back, basically. They're not that different in terms of the translation. There's some points like they use a lot more of instead of a Sea of Decay, they use much more of the toxic jungle is what they use more often in the dub, which is like an interesting thing. They never really say Sea of Decay, but yeah. Otherwise, I think like they do at least as good a job I think as you can with like doing that translation from, keep in mind, a Western perspective like mine.
Yeah, I mean, you have a much more reasonable take than I do. I'm very like conservative about this. Like, and again, I'm not being very reasonable here, but like, I never have a problem with like reading and keeping up. Simply sounds like a skill issue in my opinion. Get good at reading. But I think like watching these with the dub, it would allow you to soak in the visuals a lot more. And it is the one compelling thing that I would want to watch the dubs for, is just to like, I mean, by this point I know all these movies like the back of my hand, but like to really just get soaked in all the visuals, because there's just so much detail. These movies are rich with detail. It, just the ultimate case for animation are these movies with how just meticulous they are crafted. But once again, I completely recognize that it's not a reasonable take, but I don't think people are coming to us for reasonable takes. So
yeah, so if you're dyslexic and you want to watch these movies, Brian says, fucking read them. But no, yeah, I this dub is also actually really interesting because I want to shout out the cast list is really solid for this one. There's Alison Lohman is the voice of Nausicaä, and I think she's really solid in that part. Probably the best performance is Patrick Stewart plays Yupa.
Oh, that's good. That's good casting.
Yeah. Shia LaBeouf is Prince Milo, which this is like 2005 era Shia LaBeouf. To keep in mind, Uma Thurman plays Kushana.
That's good.
Right. Her sidekick buddy Kurotoa is Chris Sarandon. And even like a weird small part, Mark Hamill plays like the mayor of Placida. Like when they go over like at the end to Milo's father, I guess it's just like, no, we have to make sure this
on the
happen.
ship. Yeah.
Yes. So that's Mark Hamill in that version.
Okay.
It's a really solid performance. Yeah. So I think this one, like I said, one of the better dubs. I would say there are like hierarchies of the dubs. Like I would say Castle in the Sky isn't a great dub necessarily. There's a couple of those where it's not necessarily. Even like I've heard as much about Wind Rises. I haven't seen that dub, but yeah, especially like with Joseph Gordon-Levitt's the main guy. That's weird...
that one. It's set in Japan. It's a very specific story. Like that one, I would have a hard time with the dub. But like I mentioned, Ponyo is a fantastic dub. When I watched it, I was really surprised at how much I was able to tolerate that one, because it is good.
Plus, it's worth it to watch that dub just for it being an unofficial other Taken movie, because Liam Neeson trying to find his daughter.
Ponyo.
I don't know where you are, but if you give me back my fish girl. Last week, we had Adam, our guest, Adam Sidorius, was kind of talking about the divide between like Princess Mononoke and this, because we've mentioned they're kind of like similar thematically, but feel very different. What do you think like separates this one from Mononoke specifically? Like, what do you think really like makes this one have like this? What's that difference of like about 15 years or so for Miyazaki?
I think Mononoke definitely feels more. It leans more into the pessimism, and the kind of like doom laden world that he's built. In here, it feels more leading more towards the fantasy element of it. Not that Mononoke doesn't, it's got the oh man, I forget the name. Todoma? Oh, that's so bad. I don't remember the name of the little guys who like shake in the forest. Yeah. I love those guys. There's a much more, not whimsical, but again, like fantastical kind of quality to this. It feels more keen on like world building and just kind of like expanding this world. Whereas again, Mononoke is just like is really heavy and just is very dark. But and the fact that this one focuses much more on like the human element, that one in Mononoke he really doubles down on a lot of the environmental themes and the feeling that again humanity is destroying the earth and the world. There's a lot more moments of levity in this movie, I would say. And he really focuses on the world building and the kind of like the aesthetics of it, I think.
That's interesting, yeah, because I would say it leans a bit more into like the sci-fi angle than the fantasy compared to Mononoke, because Mononoke feels much more kind of like based in like these like forest creatures and these like forest gods that are like existed in perpetuity, versus here being like post-apocalyptic and having like the airships and the gliders feels a bit more like it's a society where like humans once had technology and that's gone, but it's still kind of here in a weird, interesting way. So yeah, I think that's a big differentiating point. Also, I think the protagonist is very crucial because like we kind of mentioned earlier, like with Nausicaä, she's much more kind of like optimistic and has like a love for this world despite the fact that it's decaying. Versus with our lead character in Princess Mononoke, she is much more of like embittered and angry and has a very reasonable kind of reasoning for not wanting to be around humans and all the like horrible things that they've done. And I like that Nausicaä, at the same time that she loves nature, also loves her village. She feels truly like a leader for that village in a way, especially considering like her father is in an ailing state. And everyone looks to her as sort of like this hero, this person.
She's the princess.
She's the princess, right? Like literally in the ending, there's a point where a couple people are like, "Oh, if we're gonna die, we should die in the village." No, we can't die in the village. We need to, as long as the princess hasn't given up, we can't give up either. Mm-hmm. Like she's this true rallying cry for like the last kind of like one of the last few civilizations that is still left of human life. And I find that really endearing that like she is truly much more about like, no, we can coexist. Versus, once again, Mononoke just like, fuck you guys. You guys have done nothing but fuck over nature, and I'm not living with you. I'm living with the wolves.
No, yeah. I guess, like, what I mean by it focusing more on the fantastical is more the lore and the kind of world building. Mm-hmm. But I agree, this one, yeah, has more of the sci-fi angle, which I want to get in. I definitely want to get into. It's a hopeful movie. I don't know. I don't feel great when I'm watching it's a masterpiece, but I don't feel like, yeah, everything's going to be okay when I watch Princess Mononoke. It is a really dark movie, and I will also say, like, Miyazaki, and I'm saying this as a man, so, again, my opinion is of mixed quality, but Miyazaki is just incredible at writing female characters, and especially his leads. Like, I already talked about Kiki, and how, like, he just writes these characters, these female leads who are the heroes and are brave, are courageous, are hopeful, but are flawed and are real, are three-dimensional. They go through issues, right? Like, again, that scene I mentioned from Kiki's delivery service is so heartbreaking, and obviously, that's the whole point of Spirited Away, is the kind of character growth, the character arc that Chihiro has to go through. It remains something that I think is so amazing about his movies, is that he has these female characters that are not, again, like the very common Disney thing that's become now, like, they're not girl bosses. They're not like
right.
These kind
strong female character TM kind of thing. Yeah.
Right. They feel human. They feel real. And it's another thing that I've just always loved about his movies, and that's what I love about this movie in particular. Like, this character is so well realized, and yeah, like becomes, you root for her. You end up rooting for her when she, like, we'll talk about like later when she gets like shot. It is like when she is like vulnerable, like T-posing basically on top of her glider. Like it's beautiful. It's amazing. I love the way that he writes characters specifically.
I really love the bit when she shows Yuba her secret room, and it has like all these plants that she's grown with like the irrigation, and how you can see like, wow, she's been able to like do this. It's like such an insane thing, especially in this like post-apocalyptic world, that she could achieve something this great. And yet she's like, well, I know that now with like, these guys invading, it's all gonna go to rot. I've turned off the water already, and these plants are gonna die, and I can't do anything about it. She has that self-doubt, despite the fact that Nausicaä, you're a good kid and you're so cool. Don't ever doubt yourself. But she has that just human doubt that like has existed. I think that's what I really like too, is that even in this sort of like world where like human civilization is long gone, and like the last people that are left are, living in what feels like a weird post-primitive kind of way in these societies, that like very human feelings of like self-doubt, fear, trepidation about just like your own abilities, despite the fact that you're goddamn Nausicaä of the Valley of the Wind. You can still have that
princess.
Kind of... Right, the princess. You can still have that kind of human amount of doubt is what makes Miyazaki so endearing, and is what makes his movies work so well. Even with, like, Kiki's Delivery Service is about just, like, going out on your own for the first time and realizing, like, shit's hard, and you could do, like, so much work. You could work so hard and help out that old lady bake a pie, so you can deliver it to her grandkid, and she's like, her pies suck, bye. That can just happen. You gotta like keep on going after that. Just like shit like that happens all the time, and that kind of stuff like really helps endear you. Even like the smaller movies like Ponyo, like My Neighbor Totoro, that are much more micro about like, just like kids kind of like walking around and stuff like that, have
Loving Ham.
A lot of these. Right, Loving Ham, still have these, like, very human feelings about just, like, what if, like, this friend I love goes away, or what if my mother is, like, sick in the hospital, and, like, I can't get back to her, even if she's not, like, deathly ill. It's like, I want her to come back. It's these, like, really, like, honest human things that transcend, once again, language and cultures and everything. They're just, like, it's real human shit.
Yeah, and, like, in this movie, I love that there's this, like, lore set up early on where, as you mentioned, Yupa is like sort of wandering, looking for answers to what caused the Sea of Decay, what, basically trying to like figure it out. And it is hinted at that he also has this kind of belief in this like kind of messiah figure who will lead these her village to like a paradise, basically. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the movie, like, we find out that person is Nausicaä. And yet, again, it doesn't make her this, like, bold, kind of figure. It just kind of naturally shows that through her bravery and through her actions and through how, when she is basically kind of kidnapped by the Pejit people, like, how badly she wants to get back and save her village. And it's that thing, like, he just does it through characterization, and I think it's what makes his characters really last so long, and it's why, like, they're so fully realized.
Yeah, in terms of the lore, I want to bring up two things. One, another thing they add in the dub is they have that, like, one title card that's just text in, like, the Japanese version, but there is a human narrator for that, but the voiceover is done by Tony Jay of Lord Frollo from Hunchback of Notre Dame fame.
Oh, okay.
And so it's like that weird kind of gravitas voice. And two, I would really recommend this short film that Studio Ghibli produced in 2012. They did a whole thing about basically they mentioned like the 7 days war or whatever, that like where that's when humanity was destroyed. The short, which is a live action production, the first one for Studio Ghibli, which was directed by Shinji Higuchi and written by Hideaki Anno, more famous for Beyond Genesis Evangelion, who got his start doing some animation stuff for Nausicaä, one of his early jobs, just being one of the key animators. It's a live-action short about basically like one of the giant god warriors appearing and destroying like an entire like civilization, basically. And it's like one of the bleakest things that Studio Ghibli's ever done. It feels very much like a precursor to Shin Godzilla, which
of course,
Aguchi and Anno would end up directing later. And it does really present just like these creatures who we see glimpses of in Nausicaä, these like god warrior creatures that are like so alien even for like kaiju and like Japanese cinema and stuff like that. They feel like especially in this movie, the way that like when it finally shows up, because the whole movie is basically about like these guys are trying to recreate this creature, like resurrect it so that they can get rid of all these bugs and get humanity back on its feet again as the top species. The way it's melting and all this horrible stuff, and even
so
like the corpses of these things we see, like Nausicaä when she's like at the beginning after she's like with the spores, that scene where like she goes all the way to the top of like this corpse of one of these things and like goes out of its eye hole to like get a full lay of the land, stuff like that. It's just, I like the fact that is just like an interesting detail in the background of this for most of it. It's just like, oh yeah, these giant like kaiju monster things went around just destroying the entire earth and getting rid of all life on it whatsoever. And that short also has like a very interesting thing too, where like it's narrated like a poem basically, and it has like that kind of Hideaki Anno thing where it's like this girl talking about, my brother who was in college came to my room, he suddenly showed up, but he didn't seem like my brother. And he kept talking about something was coming the next day, and they had to leave the city. And I thought it was very weird, and then he disappeared in front of me.
I found out that Hideaki Anno worked on this, like, after the fact, after I had watched Evangelion. And I'll talk more about that in a little later, but the design for that is so amazing. I love the image that we get that's kind of like, it's not a flashback because obviously she wouldn't have been there, but it's this image we keep getting of the 4 like great warriors with like the staffs that are like walking, and it's horrifying, it's this like amazing image that just like he uses like 3 times in the movie maybe, and just like is so impactful. And yeah, like I just the detail too that, as you mentioned, the Tomekians are trying to resurrect this creature, and they basically take over the Valley of the Wind because they can't carry it out. So they're like, well, we'll just occupy this valley and we'll do our work here. It's like it is so fascinating, and yeah, I love that sequence so much because it's the one kind of time in the movie that we get this like the like beam of like the laser beam that he like shoots out of his mouth, and it does that amazing thing that a lot of like anime does where you see the laser beam kind of go across the stampede, and there's a delay before the explosion to really give it the feeling of like, oh, this is a fucking big explosion. And yeah, it is so visually arresting, and so it really kind of makes sense for Hideaki Anno with what he will go on to do. But yeah, more on that a little bit later.
Yeah, we should mention also with like this movie, it's notable because obviously we've been talking a lot about Studio Ghibli. This is technically not a Studio Ghibli movie, despite the fact that it often gets kind of put into that same camp. This was the studio that did this, I believe, was Topcraft, who has an interesting history with Japan in terms of like they were kind of like a lower run studio from what I understand, in terms of like not the biggest major one. But one of the things they ended up doing was a lot of the 2D productions with Rankin Bass were animated from Topcraft. So I think like 'Twas the Night Before Christmas and stuff like that. If you've seen any of the 2D animated ones that Rankin Bass did, even the stop motion ones were done by Japanese animators a lot of the time though. They had there's an interesting cross section of like Japanese animation and Rankin Bass, but yeah, you can tell with this one that like a lot of the early Ghibli stuff is in there, and it does have that same Ghibli kind of like aesthetic to a certain degree, but it does definitely feel a bit more like grungier, maybe because of like this is from '84 and stuff like that. There's a bit more like dirt on it. Like along with when I was watching the dub, I had the weird thing of I had the subtitles on for the commentary that Hideaki Anno did, as like
Yes,
in your
yeah,
interview
yeah.
commentary.
I believe it's him and the producer, right? He's like Miyazaki's longtime producer, right?
I believe so, yes. But I just love that most of that commentary is just Anno being very much like, oh, we could have done this better. Oh, this sucks.
Yeah,
we could. It's a lot of that. Yeah, it's with him and Kazushi Katayama, who's the assistant director
Oh, okay.
on the film. Yes.
On the Hideaki Anno Miyazaki connection, one of my I've shared this with you, but like one of my favorite clips is that Hideaki Anno did the voice of the main character in The Wind Rises, and there's this amazing clip of them in the studio recording it, and he's just having him say, Miyazaki's having Anno just say like arigato over and over again, and he's just berating him the entire time, going like, come on, say it again, are you even Japanese? Come on, what are you doing here? And then he's like, turns to the camera and is like, this is the genius who made Evangelion, and just like shakes his head in like disappointment. It's just so funny. Just these very demanding and very like, kind of interesting personalities together is fascinating.
An interesting kind of inversion with that. When Anno made that short, apparently the credited voice of the god warrior that destroys all of the civilization is apparently Hayao Miyazaki. That was his contribution to that short film, doing the like giant like noises and shit like that. I would love to see that inverse. Just like, come on, you can do a better god awful noise than that.
Better growl.
This is the man who made Spirited Away, everybody. I love also in the commentary he talks a lot about just weird details of like Miyazaki at that particular time, like his just daily habits. Like he talks about like Miyazaki was one of the first people he ever knew who took supplements. Like, he doesn't specify what kind of supplements, but he's just like, yeah, he was just like chewing on them like there were those Chico nuts that Nausicaa chews on.
Yeah, I watched there's a featurette that's like 11 minutes that's like about the making of this movie with Joe Hisaishi, and I love that Miyazaki used this word that I can't remember. It's a Japanese word that I can't remember that means like entanglement, basically, like entangled relationship, that these two are just like they love working together, but like that they're just kind of like destined to be to work together, almost like cursed in a way, not as
an
negative,
unstoppable
but,
force meets an immovable object, basically, is what you're saying.
And like Hisaishi talks about how he met Miyazaki, and Miyazaki had like a bunch of storyboards for the movie, and he just talked for like an hour or two like straight, and he was so passionate about his movie and the story. And Hisaishi was like, yeah, like I was really intrigued, and I loved how passionate he was, but I just thought he was really weird. Like, he was a really weird guy, but he had like his passion for the movie really got him to want to do the score for the movie, which you talked about kind of how this movie has a lot of the later Ghibli, later Miyazaki stuff. The score for this movie is really interesting.
Yes.
There's a lot more like 80s like drums and synths going on that I remembered. And then there is also these like really grand sort of ornate orchestral moments, but yeah, it's a very strange kind of score. It often has like a Middle Eastern kind of thing to it going on. It's so fascinating. I love it, obviously, because all his scores are great.
Yeah, it tends to be like the more it's sort of like the stuff in the airships and a lot of like the combat stuff is more of that synthesized stuff. And then when Nausicaa kind of connects with nature, we get more of the orchestral stuff. It's a really interesting kind of like blend of those two and like specific uses of that. Yeah, I noticed that too. It's much different. I think apparently that kind of synthesized stuff is closer to what Hisashi was doing before he met Miyazaki, and he was much more experimental doing stuff like that. And then yeah, his sweeping scores and all the other one of his movies once again will make me fucking cry. I was crying the moment like Nausicaa becomes a part of like the golden kind of fields and stuff. Oh
yeah,
God,
it's beautiful. It's just so simple, and yet it is so unbelievably gorgeous. This movie has such an interesting aesthetic to it, because as we've mentioned, like it is set in like this post-apocalyptic world, but that is quite fantastical. There is kind of there's a lot of like spirituality in this movie. There's a lot of like mythology. There's like mysticism going on. there's like political intrigue going on, and then like you mentioned, like there's a sci-fi angle to it. It's such a wonderful, like, I mean, it's a blend made for me, but like it's such a specific kind of thing, right? Like you have these like giant insects, but then like the Tolmekian like armor is very like medieval. And I just like I love this kind of aesthetic, this blending of fantasy and science fiction that of course, like, you know, Star Wars is doing this kind of thing, but this specific kind of blend I just think is so fascinating. And yeah, it is so me, and it's another reason why I love all his movies, because they have this. But yeah, how do you feel about like this kind of weird amalgamation of genres and styles?
Yeah, it's fascinating because it feels like at certain times a bit more Western than the average Miyazaki movie, but then he'll implement something like these giant creatures that have like these tendrils like connect with you and stuff like that.
Yeah,
that feels very like odd for that. I think it's what's kind of interesting. I think that's what really like appealed to me, because like there's a bit of like, you know, almost like a Star Warsy thing with like the dog fights, but at the same time there's kind of like this intriguing kind of like connection to nature that feels very like distant from that. Like despite the fact that you can kind of see certain influences, it feels so like wholly original in its own way.
Yeah.
And it feels like it once again, like the fact that this world feels like so instantaneously like lived in well realized, it manages to make that work. And I think what helps with a lot of that is like that human connection stuff, but even like the smaller sort of fights that happen at the same time that you have like these big giant aerial battles, like the bit where Nausicaä finds her father dead after they've invaded and she like goes ham
the like
on
knife
those dudes.
fight, yeah.
Right, and then the way that Yupa stops that, like right before like when the other princess like comes in and is about to like have the huge conflict, the way he like puts his arm up and has it like stabbed through him basically from Nausicaä. Just small stuff like that where there's a little bit of blood. We kind of referenced this earlier, but like the blood in this movie is so well implemented because it's so like shocking. It really feels like every time like a bit of blood comes out, even like early on with little tiny creature, I forgot, like little almost like Eve.
Oh, the fox squirrel thing,
the fox squirrel, yes, like when it bites her, and there's just a little bit of blood coming out.
Yeah, that
like,
moment,
you feel the intensity of that. You feel like that pain, that it feels like genuine, even if it's like a small cut like that.
I love that moment though, because it tells you so much about Nausicaä as a character, where she's like telling him like, you're not scared of me, like I know you're not scared, we just need to get over, like he's like frightened a little bit, he is scared, but he's not like, the fact that she lets him like the little creature bite her and just kind of like get through that pain. It's like when I meet a cat and the cat has to like scratch me a little bit, but I'm like, no, we're gonna be friends, like you'll see, it's okay, like, you know, we'll get along. I love that moment as just this like small little character moment. And of course I love Miyazaki's his little guys. I love those little creatures that he has, and like in all of these movies, I just like it's really amazing.
I like the fact that he also has that with not just like a more traditionally cute character like that fox squirrel, but even like the Ohms, who look like intimidating and terrifying initially. And then once you see her like become more intimate with these creatures, particularly that baby one, like you instantaneously you feel like such empathy for these creatures that like on a basic design level should be like terrifying. But there's this weird, it's once again that kind of like that human initial fear of the unknown, the other that you have, where it's just like, oh my god, this giant like creature's about to kill us, we need to kill it. And then you have just like this moment where, well, if you actually just stopped and respected this creature for who it is, then they would open up to you and allow you to explore the world in a completely different way. But at the same time, there's still a threat, like even the other, like the weird, like giant purple bug one that they encounter like early on and stuff like that. They're like horrifying creatures, but at the same time, Miyazaki has a respect for them as living beings.
This is the thing about this movie feeling like bigger than just the movie. Like you can tell there's a lot of other stuff around it. Is that there's a lot of like insects that we only see for a second. Like in the caves at the beginning, especially, there's the part where she's like running out and she like steps on two of them and goes like, oh, I'm sorry. It's really cute and funny. But like lots of those insects that are just kind of like we don't see much of them, but they're around. And it's just part of this, like, the world being much bigger than world in the movie, but also the world, there existing a larger universe outside of just the movie itself.
Right, and even like the cute characters aren't just there to be like cute sidekicks for merchandise purposes. Feels like the little fox squirrel creature, he still feels like an authentic part of like this whole story as it goes along. Like, it doesn't feel like this character's like just shoved in necessarily, yeah. But, you know, we've been talking about, you know, like Nausicaä and some of these other like human characters. How do you feel about our villain, Kushana?
Yeah.
Where does she stand out, especially amongst the other kind of interesting, complex Miyazaki villain characters?
She is less complicated than a lot of Miyazaki's other villains, especially, I forget her name in Mononoke, but like, he really goes far in that movie to humanize her, and like, she cares about that like encampment that they have, like she cares about the people there and cares for the sick and stuff like that, but also is doing this evil thing. And you see the seeds of that in this movie, right? Like, at the beginning, she is just like an imperial like warlord basically, and we get glimpses into her humanity, right, when she removes her hand and we see like what the insects have done to her. And you again, it's the thing, like, you understand why she's doing this, and yet he's not agreeing with her, right? Like, but you understand what it is that's making her do this thing. I mean, I love her look, just the like gold armor with so many capes in this movie. Like, hell yeah. The capes, I love just the like swooping cape, like Yupa's kind of cape that like envelops him. I love that look. And Kushana, has the same thing with like the gold helmet. Like, it's just such a fascinating amalgamation of all these things, and yet like the Tolmekians, like, from their looks, you can tell like, oh, they are these kind of like imperial, like war-driven like people because of their armor, because like they also have guns. But that's the interesting thing about it as well. Like, there are guns in this movie, but there are also like swords and like armor and stuff like that. And like, yeah, I love the look of her. She's like, and yet like, again, you see the seeds of what will become other Miyazaki villains in the future.
Yeah, I really like that moment where she takes off her hand in particular. Like you're mentioning, you get a sense of like not only like why she has this like animosity toward these like creatures and insects in general, but also like how she like puts up the defense mechanism about that, where it's just like, oh, then I can't let anybody in then. Even during that bit where she like shows off the hand, it's like, yeah, and that's pretty odd. And you know what, the guy who's gonna end up being my husband will see a lot of other stuff.
Oh yeah,
like,
yeah.
Right. To imply that just like, oh, she has been like hurt by this world, and the way that she responds to is to not let anybody in necessarily, not to have like close intimate people. Even like Nausicaä saves her during like the air battle, and she's like, well, thanks, but you don't expect us to be friends,
yeah,
right?
She's like,
because you saved me.
Do you expect me to grovel in gratitude? Is
right.
Her line, which is it's such a fascinating way that she responds to the world. Yeah.
Yeah, even like the grovel and attitude, that it's much more about like, oh, I have to be subservient to you because you did a favor for me, instead of like, no, we're like both humans and we can like help each other out. Like, no, that's not how this works. Which
you
I think
have
is
to
also
want something from me, basically.
Right, exactly. But how that's reflected with like even like the way she interacts with like her army, and particularly her second in command, Kuratawa. I love Kuratawa. He's like such a fucking pompous piece of shit. Yes. It's so good. Where it's just like that one line, the funniest line in the whole movie, where it's just like she pops back up. She's like, "Oh, she escaped. There goes that dream." Like that little bit.
I'll never be king or whatever.
Yeah. So, and even like when he looks over, it's just like, I don't know how she changed things up, but she's looking kind of cute now. Come over here. What? Never. Okay, sure.
And he has lines, I think, although he is kind of funny, he has these lines that kind of show how much of a buffoon he is, but also how kind of evil the Tolmekians are, where he's like, he has the line where he's like, oh my god, they're resisting, like just like the Peshites. Why do these people keep resisting us? Come on, like he doesn't understand how fashy they are coming across. And Yeah, like, but never falls into being just comic relief, which is what I
Right.
love. Like, there is no character in these movies like, what was the bird's name from from Secret of Nim?
Oh, yeah, Jeremy. Yeah.
Who again in that movie works, but like, there's no character like that who is just purely comic relief, and I love that so much about all his movies like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, because like even with like that character, there's the whole thing during like the big face off against the bugs, where some of his soldiers are trying to retreat. And it's like, fool, there's nowhere to run to. Stuff like that, where it's even like, oh, in the face of this oblivion, I'm not gonna even let you like get off. You still have to stand here with like some kind of honor. And all the guys, I love that immediately after that, everyone's like, nah, fuck this, we're going. And everyone leaves.
And then the Great Warrior is like activated, and they're all like, "Yeah, honor the Tolmekian army," or whatever. Like that, there is this a very old world kind of like sense of like duty and honor to their country, their land or whatever. That is like, it is so interesting.
Yeah, and I like how that's even contrasted with like that kind of thing versus like in the Valley of the Wind, how you have like the old blind woman, the sort of soothsayer of the village, who has like some of that traditional element to her, but it's much more based in just like, well, this is like what we know, and like that connection to the earth. Once again, she's the one like during that like finale where the kids are asking her just like, are we gonna die? Well, if that's the fate that we must face, then we must face it. Stuff like that, where, you know, she's really embracing. And then the way especially that she like tells that whole backstory where it's like, I can't even see the tapestry anymore because I'm blind, but I know in the left corner there's the guy in the blue outfit, and he's going to appear on like a giant golden field, and that's the representation of our savior. And then later on, when the little kids are describing to her about like, oh, Nausicaa's in blue and she looks like she's walking on a wheat field, and she realizes like, the prophecy is fulfilled, but not in the way I expected. It's not some man who comes in here. It's Nausicaä. I've known her for her entire life, and she was like the savior we've been waiting like 1,000 years for. It's like this really beautiful moment of like this somebody who like had this embrace of like tradition and legend, and was worried like, oh, it's all gonna crumble apart. The valley's gone. We're about to die. And then finding that hope in somebody who she like helped raise basically in this village is like such a beautiful emotional moment. And that's a character who could easily become, like we're talking about, like a comedic relief character. Her, and also I think like Prince Milo's another example of that, of somebody who could become like the wacky sidekick kind of deal. And it's like, no, they all have like sincere emotional depth to them.
Another thing, Miyazaki loves little guys, and he loves like old ladies. Like he like, just the grannies in his movies are just always so unique looking and so expressive, and I love her look with like the black hood over her eyes and stuff like that. Like, yeah, and that moment is not represented as like, again, like it would be in an American movie of like, she thought the savior was a man, but actually it's a woman.
What?
Record scratch, like, you know,
dog reaction shot.
Yeah, and I mean, like with the Milo character, like, another thing he continues to do, even in like Castle in the Sky, his next movie, like, is plucky little boys who like are maybe a bit too overeager and a bit too like maybe arrogant in some cases. And yeah, he just like these are just things that he will continue to refine in all of his movies, and they're never done. But like we're saying, like, he does something similar in Castle in the Sky, but that character is kind of different and has a different backstory and has different dimensions to him. Princess Mononoke, like, the villain's kind of similar, but he does something really different with her. It's just like he's interested in these ideas, but never wants to just replicate them, like, one to one. And I think that is what makes his career just like so fascinating.
Yeah, and it's interesting how that even resonates with stuff that he didn't even like originally create, like Kiki's Delivery Service is based on a novel, or House Moving Castle also is a similar thing. But he knows too, like, he gravitates towards things that kind of appeal to these same sensibilities that he's always had. And yeah, Nausicaa is really like a smorgasbord of all that, because, you know, Castle of Cagliostro, while a great movie, is a work for hire thing. That was during the phase where he was, you know, he's still doing a lot of animation, like the Lupin the Third TV show, or even Future Boy Conan, a show I only know about because Conan O'Brien has referenced it many times when he's visited Japan. You can tell that like this movie has a lot of the seeds that would like grow from here about like what Miyazaki's work is. And it's even in small stuff like with like the Milo character. I really love that moment after, this great bit of them like getting sucked into like the sand dunes and then like
Quicksand.
going underneath. Like quicksand and into the sea of decay, like underneath that like he introduces Nausicaä to a whole different world she wasn't aware of, like a part of the world she wasn't aware of, like, oh, there is something underneath the Sea of Decay, and it's like giant open space that like we could walk around in, like the air's pure and stuff like that. Like he's introducing her to this part of it, but also it's not just like, oh, I'm showing you a whole nother side of this. They have an intimate moment in there too where he talks about the fact that Princess Lisette, which we haven't talked about that scene. That's one of my favorite scenes.
Oh, the air crash, yeah.
The air crash, yeah. That like, oh, that was my sister, and you helped her like in her time of need and everything. It's such a like small, beautiful moment that like really connects these characters. And once again, while they're in like this underground like alcove that looks gorgeous and beautiful, it's also just about like this intimate character moment. Just like, well, yeah, you did something very crucial for me, for someone I loved who I couldn't see as she passed away. It's dealing with a lot of complex emotions at the same time. That's like a really cool fantasy sci-fi story.
I think in that moment too is like when she's like after that, when she's like trying to, when they're basically like gonna get some rest before going off the next day, and he's like talking about something, and she's like, just shut up, like please be quiet for a minute. We just need like it's what Miyazaki does in all his movies, right? It's just this idea of like dialogue is not necessary like many times in a lot of movies, and moments are better when they're quieter and more intimate and gentler. And yeah, I just love that moment where she's just like, just be quiet please, let's just enjoy the ambiance and get some rest please. Because that air crash happens pretty early in the movie when she gets back.
Yeah.
And when they're like, this movie's already great, but when they're like, oh, an airship, and I was like, fuck, man. Which, obviously, yes, Miyazaki is obsessed with aviation. He loved planes growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And all his movies feature aviation, almost all his movies, in some way. They also always feature like the sky is always kind of present, right? Whether it's like even in Totoro, like them looking up at the sky and stuff like that, and obviously like the cat bus, section and all that stuff. I fucking love the airships in his movies so much. There's nothing cooler to me than an airship, especially in a Miyazaki movie, and that sequence is so amazing, that first kind of like crash that we see, and horrifying. Like you see kind of how huge these things are and how like terrifying they are, and but the sense of scale that he presents them with is unbelievable. And especially all of the like little like ohms like on the front of the plane. Mm-hmm. The design of just the airships and just the glider obviously that she flies on it's some of my favorite stuff in all these movies, I think.
Yeah, I love the airship stuff. I love the fact that these airships, like, they dominate the skies and they feel like so like grand, like the scale is so like giant and massive. But I also love at the same time that like these airships aren't treated as just like, isn't this so fucking cool? It's like they're these giant behemoths that like invade the sky. And they're not like he treats them with sort of an interesting neutrality of like there are these vehicles initially for like transport, obviously for trying to like get from place to place, but then you'll have like the gunship, which I love. It almost like that coming in with like the kind of transparent pink like bolts of lasers that like shoot at people. Yeah. I love the look of that, but I like that it presents the fact that like these giant airships are also so fragile. that like they can get shot and they can, like we mentioned, like the actual crash that happens and everything. Then when it does happen, it's like this giant, massive devastation. It causes these fires, and that helps to like, you know, with the like destruction that'll later happen. Especially, it kind of like feels like an early warning sign of that. But at the same time, he doesn't ever forget about like the humans that are inside those airships. Like that Princess Lizette moment is one of the most like beautiful, tragic moments in a Miyazaki movie, of her, like, the two of them communicating briefly, just like, make sure my cargo gets destroyed. Don't worry, it's all on fire. It's fine. It won't last anymore. And then she dies. And just that little small moment of Nausicaä, like, breaking the binds that are on her and then, like, crossing her arms is, like, such a beautiful moment of, like, giving someone a bit of dignity in death. That is, like, such a mature concept to deal with once again in this cool, giant sci-fi, post-apocalyptic kind of genre-y movie. It has these, like, an intimate moment like that really crystallizes, like, all this airship stuff ultimately leads to, like, these people dying at the same time. Like, all this horror, this death and destruction in its wake. It doesn't forget that, like, that's so crucial, while at the same time, you know, making these ships that look fucking badass and awesome.
Right. Like, well, like, I think that moment that you mentioned, it is the secret ingredient to all of Miyazaki's movies. If you watch all of his movies, there are at least 5 moments like that in all of his movies, and it is what separates him from other animators, and it's what I love. And like, yeah, the ships are very cool. He knows that. He loves aviation and machines. And like you said, he's also kind of terrified by them. They're presented as like industrial and metal and like clunky and kind of almost utilitarian, but also right. We don't have airships, unfortunately, in our world. We should, maybe a little bit, but like.
And if you elect Bryan, he will bring airships to the world.
Absolutely.
Read my lips, more airships.
One of those fucking cool gliders that Nausicaä has in this movie. I guarantee it.
A glider in every home.
For every American citizen. Yeah, and I think it's the thing, like The Blood. You could show this to a child. And again, it's a fun adventure movie. It has like cool like critters, and it has cool like designs and fun set pieces and stuff like that. And yet there are these moments that are not dark. They're not presented as like dark or gritty or anything, but they're just part of the story. And this is the thing when we talk about in America, in the West, when we talk about like animation for adults, like everyone will point to like Pixar and how like, oh, they deal with like adult themes and they, whatever, Inside Out's about depression and whatever. And it's like, that's, yeah, sure, whatever. But, and I love Pixar, we talked about them, but they make family movies, you know, like their movies are designed to, you know, be pleasing to everyone, to the masses. And the thing I love about Miyazaki's movies, and the thing that really makes them fascinating to me, is that they have these elements that feel kind of, you know, not edgy, but kind of darker and kind of grittier, and they have a bit of an edge to them, while also like, again, having this kind of style that like would be pleasing to like kids, and would be intriguing if you had a kid who was interested in watching a 2-hour movie or something. But like, even, you know, Porco Rosso, and like maybe not Princess Mononoke. Okay, that one's like a guy gets his arms like
multiple decapitations in that
sure,
one. Yeah, I don't know if
like,
the kids will like quite cling on to that. Yeah.
But with the other ones, I think it's the same exact thing. You know, like they are fun adventure movies, but they also grapple with mortality. They grapple with death, and they have like danger in them. And I just, it's what I love so much about his movies. It's why like he is just the prime example of that, of like speaking to something a bit more mature. But again, you could show this to younger audiences and they would probably enjoy it as well.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, it also doesn't go into like the 180 of that, of like the super edgy stuff. Like, this is like, I know a lot of people who are like into anime really love something like Ninja Scroll, but I find that shit, like, quite frankly, like, distasteful. It's like super gory, but also a lot of sexual assault, a lot of like, trying to deal with this, like, oh, it's like super, like, this is what adult animation is. It's like, not really. I find like, yeah, the Miyazaki stuff that does have like kind of these adult edges, I think it's more a thing of like they are for the entire family as opposed to just kids with like little adult jokes, or by contrast like super adult where it's like, yeah, this ain't your kiddies little animated movie. It's like, no, we don't really, I don't think either version of that is like really that helpful or that interesting in animation compared to like something that balances a lot of these interesting things with Miyazaki. Like, I love that a movie like this can have moments of like true gore that are like really upsetting but minimal, and at the same time have stuff like the kids in this movie are adorable. Like when they go up to Nausicaä before she leaves, she's like, "We got these nuts for you. I hope you enjoy them." And then she's like, "Oh, you must have worked so hard to get these all together. That's so nice." Like it is able to have like these very cute, intimate moments while not sacrificing like, having some kind of like heavier material in there at the same time. It can like balance all of that really well.
Yeah. And I mean, while we're talking about the airships, I want to talk about the sequence that happens in, you mentioned with the gunship at the beginning, where, I guess towards the middle section of the movie, where Nausicaä and 4 hostages. I love the thing that she picks like old people, and she's like, why'd they pick us for hostages? We're like nobodies. Like,
love those 3 guys.
Yeah. And they are basically kidnapped by the Tolmekians, taken on the ship, and I love that shot where we get like all 4 of the Tolmekian ships like in one, like just one behind the other. It's just amazing stuff, and shows like, yeah, this idea of aviation being like freeing and the freedom of the skies, but like you're saying, like this small little gunship just takes these ships out in nothing. It's also very classic, like, Star Wars does that, where it's like, well, one tiny ship can take out the AT-AT,
right,
because they're so small and nimble. And I just love this sequence for how it's a combination of all this stuff, right? It's fun and big and bombastic, but has a moment like when Nausicaa's like, no, enough of this, stop killing each other, and she like does the thing that she does later in the movie where she like puts down her weapons and like puts her arms up. And I love how it's presented where he can't see her, but when he sees her, we get this like zoom in and like the music cuts out, and it's just like it is this like beautiful, perfect little moment that I adore.
Yeah, those 3 hostage guys, by the way, that's another great example of what we were talking about earlier, where like those guys in theory are more like kind of buffoonish and like cartoonish, with like the bit where it's like, oh, you gotta like get rid of all the stuff in the ship so that you don't fall over. It's just like, oh, this is so wasteful, don't even think about it, just keep like getting it all out. And then that one guy has that one moment where I believe he's talking to Kurotoa, where like he references like, oh, you see my hands, I have the same disease that our king had.
Oh yeah.
And within 6 months my hands will be stoned, but the princess said that she loves these hands because they're the hands of a worker and somebody who works so hard. Like, that's a wonderful, once again, like little moment that crystallizes like even these like kind of funny, silly characters have like a lot of emotional depth to them that's like really earned.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that is such a good moment. And same with when they're like drop the cargo. A thing I love is, yeah, she's like adjacent to their ship, and she's like, oh, they can't hear me, cut the engine, which is a beautiful thing of just like wanting silence, wanting it to be quiet. These machines are loud. And then like she takes her mask off, and the guys are like, the princess took her mask off. What are you doing? What are you doing? And then she like gives them the thumbs up, which is such a great image in this movie. Yeah. She like smiles at them and like flies off. It's amazing. And like, I literally have the movie on in the background while we're talking about this. And like,
same
again, like, because it's animation, there's no wasted frame. Every single frame is filled with detail, is filled with just like amazing, just it's perfectly crafted, you know. And even though like, I agree with what you said earlier, like it feels a bit grungier and a bit kind of, you know, not as clean as like the other, like something like Spirited Away, for instance. There is nothing wasted. Everything is so gorgeous. Like you just want to like live in every single one of these frames for forever. It's amazing.
Yeah, and a big thing with that, like I didn't talk much about the gliders when we were talking about those, but the glider thing is such a great way to really separate Nausicaa from everyone else.
Yeah.
It's like everyone likes these
Oh, that's
airships,
good,
but she
yeah.
has like the glider, especially the bit when she like jumps off the cliff and she like twirls over to the top of the glider. It's like it's so fucking cool, and like that she has like this kind of like dynamic aerobatic kind of quality to like her body movements. It like helps to like once again like character through movement for her to like really make it truly show off that like she doesn't even need like an engine. She just needs like her own like force of will to be able to like fly like that. It feels like it's setting up a lot of the stuff that later on, like I feel so much of like Kiki flying around whenever I see her.
Yeah.
Nausicaa fly around in this movie. That it feels like it's much more of like a thing projection of like the self versus like any kind of inherent like skill or whatever, like magic. It's like no, it comes from like you being your own individual person. It makes even like the act of flying on a machine feel incredibly intimate.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely amazing. And again, yeah, the design of it is so it's like white. It's like kind of beautiful. It has like the blue light on the back where like the engine is. Again, like I love that none of this stuff makes like it makes sense in terms of like how these are supposed to work, but it's that part that is just it's the kind of it has to look cool. And I know that sounds kind of like crude, but like it just looks really, really amazing. And yet, yeah, there is all this detail that you can glean from it.
Another thing that looks really cool, I just love the way that the ohms move around, and there's like layers to them. Like they got like a pill bug thing with and like accordion kind of like squash and stretch, kind of like in the different layers of animation that are there too, of like the different layers of like the individual parts of that particular bug. I love elements like that feel especially stylistically very different from like the human characters. It makes those like bugs really stand out in a distinct way.
Yeah. I guess we haven't talked about the other faction here, the Pajit people who, again, have a very different like look to them with like those like hoods with the little like almost looks like a belt buckle or a belt kind of thing around them. Like their look is so fascinating, and they're not like the Tolmekians who want to revive the god warrior to reclaim humanity, but it's like no, they want to destroy the Sea of Decay because they see it as this awful thing.
Right.
But again, Nausicaä has a more nuanced take on this, where it's like, well, no, we can't destroy this thing. It creates, like you said, like it has this irrigation system. It purifies the air. It's nature, you know, and they are just another kind of side to humanity not realizing that, like, no, you guys, you don't matter here. It's what nature wants, basically. And I think they are presented as like not villains, but like, I don't know, they kidnap her and like lock her in a room and like take her glider. But again, it's so well realized that they're three-dimensional characters. You understand their motivation and why they're doing things. You understand like their desperation, basically, because of like you've seen just like what the world looks like and how like uninhabitable it is, and what the Tolmekians have done to their like city, basically.
Right, but at the same time, there's that factor of like there is a way they can survive. It's not like Nausicaa's like, oh, too bad, so sad, we're done. Like we can't survive. It's like no, there is a way we can survive. I've been able, because I've studied nature and I know what it's about. There is a way we can survive, but we humans cannot perceive that idea. It's like no, this is just a threat to us, and thus it must be destroyed. There's no way we can live with it. There's no way we can work around it to any degree. We are the top dog here. We are the ones who have to be catered to on this world. And I love that, especially even that discussion she has with the Brigitte when like she ends up when she shows up over there, and they just talk about like, look, we don't want to get taken over by those guys, those Tomekians. Like that political intrigue that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Even in this disparate world where everything is so like scattershot and we have so few human survivors, there's still infighting. There is still like a need to take sides against another pack of human beings, as opposed to like collaborating with them and with nature to be able to like have some kind of harmony that's not inherent to like a lot of human, especially like older adult human kind of factors like that. I love that fact. It's like you have that, but even you have something like Yupa is like one of the few examples of that, where he's an older man who's seen so much like awful stuff, like that scene where he talks to Nausicaa's father about like, yeah, I saw another village that was completely destroyed or whatever, but he sees like through Nausicaa that like, oh, there is another path, that he's able to understand that and that he fights for that. I think is like so key, and it feels once again like there's this interesting kind of dynamic of like, the more cynical you are in this world, the less likely you are to see what is like clearly a livable solution that just doesn't enter your purview. I think it's like it's a really interesting kind of nuanced take, especially for Miyazaki, that once again permeates a lot of his other movies. A lot of the adult characters tend to be the ones that don't really see the inherent interesting beauty that's around them in the world, and it's the younger folks that gotta like try and teach them that.
Yeah, he has a real like empathy for like obviously children and like something like Totoro, but like for just younger people. And that's so beautiful. And I love that, like, a detail I love in this movie is that Lastel is the princess's name who dies. And so when she's trapped on the Pejit like ship, her mother like comes in and does the same thing, says the same thing to her, like, that was my daughter, like I heard you were with her, like, thank you for that. And the hug that she gives her is like is so gorgeous. It's beautiful. It's just amazing, like heart-wrenching stuff. But I love that the way that Nausicaa is able to get help is by the kindness that she showed. And
yes.
that like leads her to, like, they do the switch and like to get her off of the ship, and it's this beautiful little moment that I love. And since you mentioned Yupa, I also, again, to kind of contrast that, he has the moment where he like flies onto the ship, and it's earlier they say like, oh, he's like the greatest swordsman in the world or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And the one soldier's like, it's Yupa, time for an opportunity for glory, gentlemen. And like they all go to fight him and then get like their fucking ass kicked, and it's
yeah.
it's so great. It's a great fun action sequence, but also, again, you have these like beautiful moments of humanity, and he's able to just have both, and they both work in this story. I also love the design of those guys with like the red helmet with like the yellow like mouth piece kind of thing. Again, just like a fascinating style of like the Tomekians have like the tanks that are very like World War One-ish kind of.
Right.
But these guys are kind of a weird amalgamation of that. I just this art style, or this art direction is so specific. And I think, like, I don't know if the creators of like the Final Fantasy games, which I talked about last week, if you want to know why we're talking about Final Fantasy on a Mars Needs Moms episode,
it's obvious. I don't know why you'd be
so
confused by that. So.
This is you were, I think you and Adam were kind of saying like, oh yeah, I don't really know what Final Fantasy is. Like, it is this kind of, a lot of the games are this style of like fantasy elements with science fiction, with a kind of industrial kind of look to them sometimes, with a kind of royal element as well in the art direction. Like, this is like right before Final Fantasy, but like I would not be surprised if the games were influenced by this, because like it's so specific, and it's something that I just like, I love. I cannot get enough of it. And like anytime he does this kind of thing and mixes it, like in Castle in the Sky, like I eat it up, because it's so unique looking, like you said earlier. Like I love it. Like the villain Kushana, like when she pulls out the pistol
Yes.
Just like gold engraving on it. Like just so many tiny details on all this stuff that I just like, I love soaking it up every single time.
What I also like too is that you mentioned, like all these things look unique, but at the same time, it does have the feeling like this is all scrapped together. Like all the airships have that quality. The different clothes also have that quality. Like even the gas masks look very World War One.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, they have like the big puffers on the other side that like go in and out when they breathe and stuff like that. It feels like this is a world once again that's like made of like these scraps of like what human civilization was. That we're able to have like certain things, even like the windmills and stuff. It feels like we're kind of corroborating from various different cultures, and but at the same time, it feels like one giant like human stew in its own way. I love all the elements of that. Like this kind of post-apocalyptic world feels very like lived in, but also like you mentioned, it feels like something at the same time like completely outside of our own like world in a weird way. Just that weird mix. But yeah, Brian, we've been talking quite a lot about Nausicaä. Is there any other stuff you want to mention we haven't mentioned about this one?
Well, there's a moment I really loved this time, which is actually maybe my favorite line, the funniest line in the movie to me, with Kurotawa, where it's when like Kushana's talking to the old men, and you see Kurotawa in the background like leaning on like his hand, like he looks bored, and the soldier in the tank is like, "Sir, we're waiting for your orders." And he's like, "Shut up." And he's like, "Yes, sir." And like just goes back.
Yeah, that's good.
I love those little moments. We already talked a little bit about the moment where Nausicaä gets shot down. She's trying to save the baby Ohm, but again, it's the thing about his characters, like depicting their bravery and their kindness in this way, where she is like, I've just been shot, but I'm still worried for this other creature and I'm trying to save it. She goes into like the water that's like poisoned.
Her foot. Yeah,
and it's just
yeah.
like it's still just the care for life. And I love that. I love that in his movies. It's the thing, like, as someone who fucking hates nature, like, I aspire to be, like, as kind as Miyazaki's depictions of his characters. I really love it. And another thing I love about this movie is that it just kind of ends. There's no like button, there's an epilogue, but it is over the credits. But like, she saves the day, she's back with her people. We have like the moment you said earlier, like the prophecy is fulfilled. And then like, bam, story over. You know, and it doesn't feel unsatisfying at all. It feels like the story's complete. What else do you need? You can have the epilogue where we have some images and stuff like that, but like, I love that. I love that about his movies. They don't waste any time. He's such an amazing storyteller in that way.
And the big part of that is, like, you mentioned the end credits, but also we didn't talk about the opening credits for Miyazaki movies. Always rule. The giant, and this one in particular, but like the different tapestries, which I found out apparently,
Gorgeous.
I don't know, talked about in the commentary that like Miyazaki actually painted all those himself, like during the end of production. So apparently it's like we were scrambling to finish the movie, he's just having fun over there painting the tapestries for the opening sequence.
And with all of this stuff, like at this point, right, this is all like hand drawn. Right?
Yeah.
So like, how the fuck do you do this? Like, I watch these movies and like I mentioned, just all the tiny detail. There's moments like on the ship, you see like the screws and all of this stuff. And it's art in the purest sense. Like, obviously, like, yes, this is like literal art because it's drawn, but like, this is it's everything, you know? And like I mentioned earlier when we talked about, I think on the first episode of the season, about like what animation can do. And you could not do this or any of Miyazaki's movies in live action. Like you couldn't do it. It would not be the same. It wouldn't feel the same. And he is just the ultimate example of that. Even like the small scale stuff, like even Totoro, like just wouldn't work. And I think, but this being like a big epic action adventure fantasy sci-fi political intrigue kind of movie, you just could never do this in live action. There would be like, it wouldn't look as good, but even if you had all the money in the world, like, it wouldn't look like this. It wouldn't look this beautiful. It wouldn't look this detailed. None of that. And I think it's just the ultimate testament to what animation can do. It is just presenting you something that literally cannot be possible. And yet, through animation and through the, like, again, fucking wizardry that Miyazaki and his animators employ at Ghibli, like, if you can draw it, then you can do it. If you can animate it, you can do it. And that is just the ultimate thing I love about his movies. They represent that in every capacity, no matter how big and epic it is. If you're presenting like a giant globby monster thing, or if you're just depicting like two girls in rural Japan, like, all of his movies represent that in the purest way. And yeah, he is just one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very wise that Ghibli, the closest they've come to like doing quote unquote live action is having the stage adaptations, which I've seen clips of stuff like they did it for Spirited Away and Totoro, where it's just like, oh, we can have like live action, but it's like, let's do giant puppets. It's like,
sure,
yeah, do that.
Absolutely.
If you're gonna do it, do that kind of shit. Yeah. But yeah, I think another sequence that really does a great job of that, the sequence I really want to spotlight that we've referenced a lot, but I think is like my favorite thing about this movie, when Nausicaä gets absorbed by like the tendrils of the Ohms. And I just love that one, the way that like the Ohms end up, like, she gets enveloped in them, and then her clothes like kind of disappear. And it's not like a sexual thing. It's like, oh, it's a like letting your guard down, getting all of this like barrier to like nature off of you, so you can like be one with this creature. And then having like this flashback, particularly of like young Nausicaä.
Oh yes, thank you for bringing this up.
Right,
yeah, go on.
Right, which is probably I love this whole sequence where Nausicaä basically, she establishes, oh, I encountered like a baby Ohm when I was younger, and I tried to protect it from these people that were around us. It's like, oh, the insects have gotten to her. They're manipulating her, and they take that Ohm away. And she's like, don't hurt it. It's something that I think other Miyazaki or even Studio Ghibli movies have done. Like, even The Cat Returns tries to do that in a really weird way. That I'm just like, oh, this is, it's just like doesn't fucking work to any degree. It's just a weird, like, almost Deus Ex Machina in that movie. Versus here, it feels totally in keeping with her character. And I love the way that whole sequence is depicted, where like there's the cross stitching to indicate it's a flashback. Mm-hmm. Love that shit. I think that's so great. But yeah, it really establishes, like, even from the jump, Nausicaä had this incredible empathy for these like bug creatures, and that didn't go unnoticed by these bug creatures. That's something that they kind of like lived with this whole time, that they're like really communicating, like, no, you are one of the better humans out there. You do care about us, and we do appreciate it. Which is something they can't keep consistent with, like, the rage that builds up later, like when that giant stampede of the Ohms are coming at them, at the humans, and they have these like red piercing eyes, and they're like coming towards us. It's so intimidating. But the fact that Nausicaä has this empathy for these creatures and is able to just like stand in front of them with that baby, and even get her entire body like flipped up into the air, and still keeps going with it. Yeah, I think that the whole flashback sequence is a great job of establishing a lot of that stuff and paying it off wonderfully with that finale. And then allowing her, once again, when she becomes like the chosen one, when she gets like the blue outfit, and she's all gliding around on like the animated version of like the wheat fields from like Gladiator or whatever, and she's like moving her hands through them. It's another one of those moments, just like I tear up. It's so beautiful. I love seeing that shit.
Yeah, I love. I got two more things. One, you mentioned like the Ohms, like the red eyes. What a simple, but such an effective way to depict like what they're thinking, or how they're reacting, like what their mindset is.
Versus the blue eyes when they're much more tranquil. Yeah.
Oh, and I love that image we get of like Yupa and Milo like looking over, and you see like a few of them start to go blue, and then it like goes across the whole like stampede, like they all become tame. Like, what an incredible image. And two, that sequence, the flashback sequence is like, it's obviously a flashback, but because it's animated with this like glow this like haziness to it. It's almost presented like a dream. And I just love that kind of like mixture of the two where it's like, again, it's obviously a flashback, but it has this kind of dreamy quality. It's her connection to the ohms that's like reminding her of that. Gives it this kind of like spiritual thing. I just like, I just love that it's not just like a simple, oh, she remembers this moment. Like, it's presented like a bit more complexly. Any final thoughts, or do you want me to go?
Yeah,
go first.
Well, I want you to have the final word, given you're such a big Miyazaki fan, as am I. But I'll go first here. I'll just say that I love Nausicaä of the Valley of the Wind. It's one of my favorites in the Miyazaki catalog in general. I would say it's in my top 5 Miyazakis. I personally would have the ranking. I can rank these. I have the capability to do that myself. And I can say that I would say my number 5 is Mononoke, Nausicaa's 4, Totoro's number 3, Ponyo's 2, and Spirited Away's 1. But they're all like such incredible, great movies. Nausicaä fits right there amongst them. And a big reason we wanted to talk about this movie is I feel like it gets very short-shrifted when people talk about Miyazaki movies. It's definitely one where like most people, I would say, that like really love these movies tend to even like exclude Castle in the Sky. It's much more like Totoro tends to be the kind of like the beginning of like Miyazaki knowledge. It seems to be, which, like, no discredit to anybody. I'm not trying to gatekeep in that way, but I do feel like the Nausicaä gets short-shrifted because of that, especially since it's not technically a Ghibli, even though it's been retconned to be a Ghibli, basically. And I think that's criminal, because I think this movie is an incredible mix of the sci-fi, fantasy kind of action stuff, political intrigue, kind of like horrors of man elements of it, and then the real beauty of nature stuff that has really permeated throughout like the Miyazaki career, especially like if you have not seen Nausicaä and you love the other Miyazaki movies, it is like the blueprint for a lot of his movies to follow, but it also doesn't feel lesser. It doesn't feel like, oh, this is the trial run that he got better afterward. I think this still stands up as one of the greatest works, and I think it's like such an incredible film, but at the same time, I feel like it deserves far more love than it gets, and I think it's just that Nausicaä kid, she's such a good kid. That's the ultimate thing. Like, even with all this other shit, what I love so much about Miyazaki's movies is that they're about, like, really good people who want to do the best they can despite, like, the circumstances around them, the world around them that's constantly berating them about, like, oh, you can't make it, you can't keep going, you can't, like, stop what's been tradition for so long or whatever. It's very much one of many great stories from Miyazaki about just like a young person facing adversity of like just the world around them and managing to persevere because they're good kids, Brian. Nausicaa's a good kid.
Miyazaki himself, as we mentioned, like, is kind of a pessimist, a little bit, like, and yet he has this kind of optimism for the next generation, basically, like that the children are our future, like our hope, and can maybe get us out of what we have done to humanity. I agree with you. I think this movie, it contains basically almost everything that he's interested in. The, like you mentioned, sci-fi adventure, the focus on aviation, the hope for humanity while also butting up against his own kind of misanthropic and kind of like despair. It does feel underappreciated for Miyazaki, like this in Castle in the Sky. I think like Porco Rosso has seen a lot of resurgence over the past few years, and even like Castle of Cagliostro and stuff like that. But yeah, this and Castle in the Sky, I think are, they are both his kind of like adventure movies in a way, and they have a kind of grand fun to them, but again still have all these elements that he is fascinated by. I think this movie is a masterpiece. I really do. I think all of his movies are masterpieces. In my ranking, this is number 9, and I think it's a masterpiece. We've talked about it for like 2 hours. That is how strong his filmography is. It's incredible. I agree with you. It doesn't feel like a trial run. A lot of like early movies can feel like that, where it's like, oh yeah, this is what the filmmaker was interested in, but they really developed it further down the road. Like, no, this has everything. I don't even want to say it's not as deep because that feels wrong to say, but like he complicates it further down the road. He approaches it from a different angle. He does all that kind of stuff. Like, yeah, I love this movie so much. I think it remains kind of underappreciated, and I hope that more people see it because it's very strange. It's a very strange movie, and yet I love it. I'll do my ranking as well right now. As always, this is subject to change. Like tomorrow, I could change this, but my top 5 are number 5, Princess Mononoke, number 4, Castle in the Sky, number 3, The Wind Rises, number 2, Kiki's Delivery Service, and number 1, My Neighbor Totoro. He is just one of the greatest filmmakers to ever grace our planet. And the world is such a better place for having the films of Hayao Miyazaki.
Well, on that note, why don't we go ahead and transition into our usual segment, Between the Lines. So on every episode of Cinema to the Letter, Brian and myself usually recommend a movie that's either related to the one that we're talking about today to some degree, or could be an alternate choice for the M for Masterpiece for, the animation season that we're doing. And I'm going to start here. I decided to recommend another film from Studio Ghibli, but not necessarily one that Hayao Miyazaki directed. He has the screenplay credit on this. And the director is Yoshifumi Kondo. Apologies if I've mispronounced that, but he was a Studio Ghibli animator who had worked on a lot of stuff like Kiki's Delivery Service, Grave of the Fireflies, stuff like that. And tragically, this is his only film where he has a director credit because he died from an aneurysm in 1998, shortly after Whisper of the Heart came out. Which Whisper of the Heart is, I wanted to recommend because it feels like a stark contrast to Nausicaä, which, as we mentioned, is this big sci-fi action adventure. By contrast, Whisper of the Heart is a very quiet, intimate, sort of slice-of-life movie about our young protagonist, Shizuki, who is a 14-year-old student at in junior high, who is just trying to, navigate her life, where, like, she's kind of like in a bit more of an independent state because like her parents are very busy either at work, or her mother tends to go to school as well to try and get her degree, and she's often like tasked with like, hey, you gotta like do some of the chores around here, or you gotta like cook dinner for us, stuff like that, while and in a way that feels very much like, hey, you're just like a part of the team kind of deal. And she's living with that while at the same time she loves reading books, and she has this particular fascination with the fact that every book she checks out has the same name attached to it on the front, where there'll be like the section of like, oh, who checked this out previously? And it's the same person's name. She keeps trying to find out who this person is, and when she does encounter that person, it ends up sparking a bit of a little like first love romance kind of thing with her. And it's about her just kind of like navigating like all that stuff in life, and also she starts getting interested in writing because she's kind of feels a bit directional. She doesn't have like a particular like goal or like passion that she's pursuing, and she's kind of feels a bit lost in that teenage state. And I think this is a beautiful little movie. I rewatched it earlier today, and I think it's the best example to me of this kind of this element that we're talking about of like, oh, the slice of life like anime movie, that it happens a lot. That's a recurring genre, but this is one of my favorites because it just feels like so lived in a way that feels reminiscent of Miyazaki, but also not like it's exactly copying it. Like I don't think any of the Miyazaki movies feel quite as detailed about like modern life in particular at like that specific time in '95, because there's like small little details like she mentions early on with her dad about like, oh yeah, they're digitizing all of the records out from the library.
Yeah, that's
and
great.
She's like, but I love the card catalogs. I think those work great. And he's like, yeah, I agree with you, but that's what they want to do. And it's like those small little details that feel very much lived in up like that particular moment. There's some fantastical stuff with particularly one whole like fantasy sequence where she is starting to write the story about this little cat statue that the local clockmaker has. That's this like little cat with this little cat that has like a a suit on and like a top hat. Looks very dapper. Yeah, she starts writing the story, and I love the relationship she has with that guy who owns the clock shop. That's like so beautiful. Where it's like, oh, he is like the way that he fixes that one clock that has like the little mechanisms, like the little dwarves with the gemstones, and then like the little princess who turns into a lamb and stuff like that. It's like so well done. And the sequence where she gives the story to him to read, and she's so insecure about it, even when he's like, no, I loved the story, it was so great, I was really entertained by it, and she like lists all the reasons why it's bad and all this other stuff. It feels like it captures a certain kind of like teenage anxiety so well that once again feels very universal. Despite the fact that this takes place specifically in Japan in 1995. I think it's an incredible little movie. It has a recurring usage of John Denver's Country Roads.
Oh, yeah.
There's a whole thing where she keeps writing like different lyrics, like translate into Japanese in different ways, and it's this really cute runner that goes throughout the whole movie. Yeah, I think it's an incredible movie. It's such a shame that Kondo did not get to direct another movie after this. I think it's a beautiful film. I would have loved to have seen more from him. And I know it especially crushed Miyazaki, is like he was basically like Miyazaki's protege. Like he really tried to train him to be like the next in line to kind of like keep going with Ghibli, and I think that really crushed him. It seems that like that guy just passed away so suddenly. But yeah, I love this movie. You've seen this movie, right?
I have. I love this movie so much. It was the one because I had seen the image of the cat, the little statue, and I didn't know anything about what this movie was about, and it was when all the Miyazaki or all the Ghibli movies got put on Max, now HBO Max, and I was like, I'll watch this. I knew he wrote it, but I didn't know anything, and I was surprised that it was so slice of life. That, like you mentioned, it has fantastical sequences, but it is not supernatural, really. It is mostly like slice of life, just living, just learning about this girl's like life and her like how she goes to school and lives with her family and stuff like that. And I was just like so caught off guard and so pleasantly surprised that it was so calm and so just like serene and gentle in that way. And I love it. I think it speaks to what I was saying earlier about you can do anything in animation, and just doing this kind of slice of life story is amazing in animation. Like it looks so amazing. I love everything you said, like the way it explores her personal life and the troubles that she's going through and how she finds this person that she just likes being around, and it's so beautiful. I really love this movie. I should watch it again. As we're talking about it, I immediately feel like watching it again because it is so beautiful.
Well, Brian, what's the movie you're recommending for Between the Lines for this episode?
All right, so here's the thing. I was going to recommend Whisper of the Heart, but then you stole it from me, you bastard.
I claimed it first. You could have said at any point.
No, it's okay. It got out there anyways. I'm recommending a movie that I can't tell you anything about, but I can tell you some stuff about it, because I'm recommending the end of Evangelion. Of course, directed by Hideaki Anno and Kazuya Tsurumaki. I have recommended Evangelion many times to Thomas, but now I'm doing it on the record. Okay, this is going in the history books, Thomas. So now you have to watch Evangelion because, yes, as we mentioned, Hideaki Anno worked with Miyazaki, and Evangelion, I think, is just one of the greatest things, movie, TV, animation, non-animation, whatever, that I have ever seen. And again, I can't really tell you much about this movie, but I can give you some of the context around it, and also, of course, of Evangelion, because this is my sneaky way of just recommending Evangelion to Thomas on mic. It begins as a very kind of by the numbers in a way for anime show about kids who control these mechs in a kind of post-apocalyptic world, but as the story kind of goes for Hideaki Anno as he was making this show, he found out basically that he has been suffering with depression his entire life, basically, and if I remember correctly, I might be a little bit wrong on this, like, he basically just didn't know that was what was wrong with him, and about halfway through the show, it takes this kind of darker tone, and it becomes more abstract and metaphorical. The ending of the show, which I will not spoil here, but was very controversial at the time. I think the original ending for the series is one of the most poignant things I have ever seen put to film, to video, whatever you want to call it. But it was so controversial that Anno decided to redo the ending, also influenced by the fact that he received a lot of death threats and just awful messages in this movie, The End of Evangelion, which becomes sort of meta. We see like graffiti that was graffitied onto the I forget the name of the animation studio, but basically the animation studio that worked on Evangelion, and it is a redo of the final, I believe, 2 or 3 episodes of the show, and it is no less daring or bold than the series itself, but it is one of the most just unbelievable things I have ever seen. It feels so grand. It feels so, I said bold already, but just completely out there. Just so daring to do this for something that was a remake. There are a few quite iconic scenes that I don't want to spoil for Thomas in this movie. But there is nothing like this, and I think you get a sense of Anno's kind of style when you find out that one of the main things he worked on with Nausicaä was the giant warrior kind of section, and the kind of like goopiness, the grossness, the horrifying quality to it. It is all over Evangelion. It is just amazing. Obviously, just not just about mental illness, but there is a lot of like Christian, like Catholic kind of imagery and iconography in the show. It is just unbelievable, and I am taking this opportunity by recommending The End of Evangelion to basically recommend the series. Yeah, it is phenomenal. I know you have not seen this, but now that I have cornered you, do you feel any more enticed to watch Evangelion after my persisting?
Well, Brian, this might shock you, but you aren't the first person to recommend Evangelion to me.
Good.
Necessarily. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It's just been one of those things, yeah, where I've been like, it's on the list, you know, that massive list of endless, particularly of shows. And it's like, oh yeah, I should probably watch that or whatever at some point. But I know it's pretty high up there, especially for like the anime variety. And I know, how long is Evangelion again? Like how many seasons?
About
is it? How many episodes?
26 episodes, I believe.
Okay.
It is short, and then this is the only movie worth watching, I believe. There's a couple ones that are like basically compiling the last like 2 episodes. Okay. But yeah, about 26 episodes. I will just say also, if it entices you at all, there is a penguin character named Pen Pen. Come on, what more could you ask for?
Well, you know, I've been hearing about like giant mechs and big action.
No.
But now you mentioned the penguin.
Pen.
Shit. That's all you had to say. But no, I'll get to it one day, Brian. It's on the list. It's on the giant list of endless things I have to fucking watch at this point. But yeah, let's go ahead and just repeat our titles out there for people in case they want to, reach out to put these on your watch list and stuff like that. I recommended the 1995 film from the late Yoshifumi Kondo, Whisper of the Heart.
Yes, and I had from 1997, Neon Genesis Evangelion, The End of Evangelion, from creator Hideaki Anno and Kazuya Tsurumaki.
Yes, and we're going to start wrapping up here, but we want to thank some people like Burial Grid for our music for the show. Purchase this music at burialgrid.com. Thanks to Michelle Kyle for the artwork for our show. Find her at MishKyle96 over on Twitter. And thanks to our supporters on Patreon, our cineast patrons at patreon.com/cinema2letter, where for just $1 a month, you all get access to bonus stuff that we post all the time. Like, around this time in August, upcoming, there will be an audio review for Weapons coming out. That should be a lot of fun. The new film from Zach Kreger should be very interesting. And then also our big August bonus podcast is our top 10 films of the 21st century. Not an intimidating thing at all to do a top 10 list about.
Yeah, easy. Just crank it out in 5 minutes.
Yeah, whenever, and just like bullshit that out, yeah. Rattle them off. But yeah, that'll be a very intimidating, fun one to do, as we will be doing here in August. So yeah, support us on the Patreon, really helps out the show. And you can find us on usually whatever hell site you peruse. We're going to be there at Cinema 2letter. And you can find me on Blue Sky and Letterboxd at Not the Who's Time. That's mainly where I post stuff.
Yeah. And for me, you can mainly find me on Letterboxd, just at my name, where I feel like I'm gonna start watching all these Miyazaki movies again, because as we've been talking about it, I'm in the mood. But yeah, follow me on there.
And for more of us, please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts or other podcasting platforms. If you're listening on Talk Film Society, want to listen to all the other great shows on the network. And you can dig into the archives on our Podbean main feed for, all the past seasons of Cinema to the Letter are there. And also our, the old Double Edged Double Bill stuff's all there for you to listen to. And everything else, if you can't support us on the Patreon, that's cool. Money can be tight for some people, but the free way to help us out is to rate, review, or simply share the show around to give us more visibility. Have us spread around like the poisonous spores that infect the people of the Valley of the Wind. We're just going to stick in your lungs. It'll be fun.
Perfect.
But on that note, we should tease our next episode, the big finale of our animation season, our A for Atypical choice, Fantastic Mr. Fox, a movie that I know we both love, have a lot of affection for, and also a very unique film, particularly in stop-motion animation, from a unique presence in Wes Anderson.
Hell yeah. Spoilers? Perfect movie. I can't wait to watch it, can't wait to talk about it. Another just gorgeous, absolutely incredible movie that represents the best of animation. So, yeah, very excited for that.
Yes, but that's for next time. Until then, everybody, Brian and I gotta get out of here in the only way we know how. Via airship.
Airships,
Come on, Brian.
yeah.
Yes! Let's go!